looks like we have everybody. So welcome to our October 14th budget workshops. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to lead us through this process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so I'm going to start off with introductions. We have myself, Jennifer Byerly. We have Peter Jones, Sharon Trask, Kevin Schutte, Randy Netherland, Diedrich Allen, Diane Zorn, Richard Dickinson, Cheryl Hilt, Tom Davis, and Travis Adams. Is there anyone that I missed in the room, in the Zoom room? Okay, so with that, this is our 2021 budget workshop for Office of Public Defense. And Peter, you can go ahead and take it away for your department.
Okay. Well, I tried to keep my number of requests down this year. I know we're looking at some budgetary issues. I'm going to start backwards with my third PLR. That's for some additional office equipment. And you've got look at this. Nice share screen, Jennifer. So I am still in contact with both Seattle University and now the University of Washington, seeing if we can do something intern externy starting next summer. We were going to do it starting this summer, and then COVID, and then that kind of fell apart as a result. But hopefully by next summer, the COVID crisis will be controlled and at a minimum, and we can start bringing that plan back online. And so I'd like to get, just a little bit of extra furniture in there, a couple of desks, a couple of chairs, to deal with having interns. And so that's the PLR number 3. Number 2 is cell phones. I kind of explained that in the worksheet. We're running into a problem with client contact in that we have a lot of homeless clients, most of whom aren't awake during business hours. And so we'll come in and we'll get, a voicemail on the machine saying, hey, what's your text number? What's a good text to get a hold of you? Most of our clients want to be able to text our attorneys. That isn't a service we can provide right now because all we have are our personal cell phones. We don't have county cell phones. And I'm certainly not going to require my attorneys to give out their personal cell phone contact to their clients. The problems involved with that are myriad and probably obvious. And so the other thing that cell phones would do for us is allow for quicker communication from the office to one of the attorneys that's in court, or from an attorney in court A over to court B. Right now we've got, really what we have is we send someone on foot from the office to physically come into court to talk to us if there is something that needs to be done. That's wildly inefficient, and I would very much prefer to be able to utilize text messaging for that as well. And so that's the reason for request number 2. Request number 1 is a repeat from last year. It's the Defender Office Management System, case management system. I continue to think that this is something for the office that would improve us in a number of ways. It would, right now I've got all of our information in a series of Microsoft Access databases. So what attorney is appointed to who is in this database? What client contact information we have is in this database. What agency information we have is over here in this one. And then we've got different tables for different years, and looking up everything is difficult, time consuming, and likely to miss something. the longer we continue on that kind of limited technology, the more likely it is that at some point I get a public records request and a ball gets dropped. I'm paranoid about public records requests, and I think rightfully so, but I'm very concerned that I don't, because of how scattered our data is, it's not in one centralized area, that something is going to get missed at some point. Defender also puts all of it in one spot, makes it easily accessible for everyone, lets us network with the prosecutor's office. Prosecutor's office is already running a Carpel case management system. That's why I've looked at this one specifically, because it would network directly in with the prosecutors. It would allow them to share information with us at one click. And it would allow us to store all that information in one spot. Right now, the way it works is they send out an email. That email contains a link to their Carpel for things for us to download, but that link is temporary. And so we have to download it off of their Carpel and re-upload it directly into the county system to make it a part of our structure, which means for every police report, for every discovery request, for everything, the county is currently storing 2 PDFs when it could be storing 1. And that is a lot of, when taken as a whole, I mean, that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases a year where we are storing 2 files instead of 1. And I know storage space has become an issue for the county. The other thing that Carpel would allow me to do, and this one I didn't really talk about last year because I was in the middle of kind of digging my way out from under it, is it would increase my abilities to manage my attorneys. One of the pieces of data I do not have ready access to right now is how many cases my attorneys are resolving and at what rate. And by resolving, I don't just mean pleading guilty, I mean getting dismissed or taking to trial or doing something with. But being able to close a case, I don't know what rate they are doing that at. I do know what rate they are getting cases. I don't know what rate they're closing them out. When an attorney, and we had this happen a couple of times last year, where an attorney would not be closing cases out at the same rate at which they were getting them. And it doesn't take much math to realize that if you're getting 33 misdemeanor cases a month and you're closing out 16 misdemeanor cases a month, that next month is going to be a little bit more busy than this one. And the month after that's going to be worse, and the month after that's going to be worse, and it kind of keeps snowballing. In both of those cases, I didn't find out about the problem until we were very, very, very deep into it. Because when I check in with them and when I talk to my attorneys, it's always, yes, I'm doing things. I'm on control of it. No problem. I've got it. It's handled. And until I can see, this case is closed, this case is open, and have something that shows me those numbers, there's really not a way that I can double check that without, going into the courts and looking at each individual case they've gotten. Carpel would give me that kind of feedback. It would allow me to see exactly at what rate my attorneys were closing cases out, which would give me kind of an early warning system for, okay, this attorney isn't closing cases out quite fast enough. Let's do something now so that we don't run into some of the real catastrophic stuff that happened last year where, we had attorneys leaving for mental health reasons and dumping their massive caseloads on me directly. I really want to avoid that. I think Carpel is a tool that will drastically improve my abilities to avoid that. And so for all of those reasons, I know that the installation process for Carpel is expensive, and that it is clearly my most expensive ask for this next year. And I still included it just because of all of those reasons. So everything else I kept, at the 2020 levels, or the adjusted 2020 levels for the personnel stuff. So with that, I guess I'll just sit back and see if the commissioners have questions.
Peter, the Carpel, is that the same program that's also used by the courts?
No. So the courts use Odyssey, which we have access to, but we have access to it to look it up by individual case. We have access to it to look it up by docket, and that'll give us basic information. That'll give us everything that's on record with the court for a specific case or for a specific docket. What it won't give us is client contact information. It won't give us any access to discovery, because discovery is never filed with the court. And so it doesn't give us, and it doesn't let me run those kinds of searches of how many cases has this attorney closed out? How many cases has this attorney opened? How many witnesses have they been contacting? Where are we spending our investigator money? It doesn't centralize that data the way that Carpel would. And so the court system, we do have access to it, and it is useful, but it is useful in a very kind of narrow way.
Limited, gotcha.
Peter, with the software, is there any economy of scale, essentially, with, is there a way to link that into the prosecutors from a not a, I guess, just in the sense of, is there a way to share in their contract, or does yours have to be standalone, or does this factor that in?
This kind of factors that in. It's the biggest cost within that, and I is the installation. The biggest cost really is taking what we have in all of our various Microsoft Access databases and transferring that into the Carpel system, which they have ways of doing. And those sorts of labor hours really aren't affected by the fact that the prosecutor is running Carpel. The yearly subscription fee type stuff is. And I when I was speaking with the sales rep, I asked exactly that question. And this was the quote I was given. So
what portion of the $29,625 is installation, startup versus annual licensing fee?
Let me pull that up. One of the nice things about doing this in Zoom is that I still have access to my email directly. Of course, it's been archived by now.
Even if you could just ballpark it, I mean,
it's ballpark. I believe 15,000 is the capital part of the expenditure, and then 14,000 is the yearly. I would have to go back in and get.
Gotcha. So
I mean, specifics. I can certainly find those and get them to you.
Not a problem. And then, and this may be my own naivete, but as is $4,400 really the going rate to buy cell phones and put them in service for us?
That was calculated by me requesting the number for essentially 5 cell phones.
Okay, that's for 5. Gotcha.
Or excuse me, 6. 1 for the office and then 1 for each attorney.
Okay. And then I guess my last question, Peter, I'll start with a comment and then kind of ask you to weigh in. First off, appreciate your work on the budget. You always come with great ideas and a very responsible outlook on things. So I'm always grateful for that. One of the conversations you and I have had offline also came up yesterday with our Superior Court briefing, and that was about the ITA court and that workload. And I was hoping that you could share some of the thoughts with everyone that you've shared with me about kind of how you're tracking that and what the future might look like from your perspective on it.
So, and you're right, we have talked about this individually. The ITA court is certainly turning out to be more than anyone anticipated. When we were originally presented with the ITA court, we were presented with the idea that it would represent maybe 2 to 3 cases a week. We set up 3 dockets and we're told, well, you'll probably only need 2, but best to have 3 just to be err on the side of caution. I did 6 cases yesterday. I did, I think 18 cases last week. We're up over 160 cases since March. We are way above what anyone thought would happen with the ITA court. What has happened is when we were doing the initial math with Shelton Telecare, and when we were doing the initial math with the behavioral health organization, we were, whatever their new acronym is, Shelton Mason, Mason Thurston Behavioral Health, whatever. When we were doing the math with them, we calculated everything based on the numbers that were coming out of Mason County and going into that Mason Thurston system. And those numbers have turned out to be relatively accurate. COVID has seen a spike in them, right? As soon as we had the pandemic, there was a jump in the numbers. Apparently, if you put in place a government lockdown as the result of a pandemic, a number of paranoid schizophrenics think they were right all along and go off their meds. But in addition to that, what we didn't calculate for was the fact that Telecare is importing people to Mason County. And so Mason County is dealing with a number of cases from Pierce, from Clallam, from Lewis, from all over. Because Telecare is a statewide system and just sends people wherever they have an empty bed. I did one last week from Benton County because they shipped them here up from Kennewick. And so those numbers were never contemplated when we started putting the system together. And as a result, there are a lot more cases in the system than anyone ever thought were going to be in the system. To date, my method for handling this has been to simply handle it. This is another situation where, I'm just taking the cases and doing them. It is inconvenient. It is a large drain on my time. And it is not a situation that is a long-term solution. I knew the budget was tight this year. I did not ask for additional staffing to deal with that situation this year. And We've just opened the new facility upstairs, so it's gone from a 16-bed situation to a 32-bed situation. The long-term facility upstairs is supposed to be long-term, and so it's not supposed to be adding cases at quite the same rate, because instead of a turnover of 14 days, they'll have a turnover of 90 days, maybe 180 days, maybe longer. And so my thought is I'm going to get a year's worth of data. I'm going to see how much time it is, and I'm going to see how much we're getting reimbursed for it. Right now, we're being reimbursed at a $60 an hour rate for my time. I'm going to try and get the next year's contract to translate it as a portion of an FTE and not as an hourly, so that I'm not spending half of my time tracking the hours that I put in on the thing. But it is likely that when we are talking about the 2022 budget, I will be coming to you with both a revenue number based on the reimbursement we're seeing, or we should be seeing by then from all of this, as well as a request for additional staffing if this rate of cases keeps up, because there's just so many cases to deal with. I'm kind of drinking from the fire hose at this point.
I appreciate that, Peter, and I think it's a smart thing to continue to track the data. We're not at the point where we have a full year even under our belt yet, but
right.
Definitely, I think really good to be thinking ahead about that issue, and it really speaks to some of the challenges statewide in behavioral health care response. And if you went to Benton County, you would probably find people from Mason County there in the facility, and as you mentioned, that we have folks from there here, and so it's really an issue that the state needs to kind of get a handle on, and until then, we're going to be on the front lines of it.
Peter, a few of the things I want to clarify here on the cell phones and the price you have here. Did you ask for any specific type of cell phones, or is this a standard issue and this is the number given by staff in order for you to
standard issue, and that's the number given? If the number is different, I'm happy to change it. Just whatever. I just need a phone that's capable of sending and receiving a text message. That's what I don't need the phone to be anything fancy.
Yeah, but these days we want to have, if we do this, we want to have, your standard smartphone, so you could also do some accessing of things when needed quickly. Next question is, I want to separate this out. I'm sure I understood you correctly. I just want to separate it. On your request for the software, what you're actually asking for is $15K one-time capital startup request and $14K ongoing for the servicing of the software, correct?
Roughly, ballpark. I will get that quote out of my email retain, and I will send it to all three of you after this.
Oh, roughly is good enough for what I'm looking for, trying to figure out. So now the reason for it, some of the things that we really didn't talk about much, but I see might be a benefit. Correct me if I have this wrong. That some of this can be used for a performance audit. It can be used for determining which ones are having their caseloads and the restrictions that are put on us by the state. And you can keep track of that much easier. It'll also help you to plan for future distribution of this. And with that being said, you are carrying a full caseload yourself. So as an administrator, you're also having to do this work without the computer program to help you streamline it. This would, I don't want to say free up time to do more cases because you can only handle so much, but this would actually aid in that as well, correct?
So as an administrator, my long-term goal is the one place that I am not completely in compliance with the OPD requirements is myself. That is the one place that we are not. And every year when I fill out the OPD budget request, or their grant request, one of the things they say is how many administrators do you have? And it define an administrator as someone who is not carrying a caseload. And I am carrying the ITA caseload. I do conflict work for the juveniles. I do conflict work in Superior Court, and I still have some cases that I took over from Mr. Lewis when he departed in Superior Court, although those are just a couple here and there now. The ones that were on warrant, mostly. And I'm doing all of the drug court stuff. And so I am carrying essentially a full caseload. Long-term, the goal is to get me to stop carrying a caseload to bring me into compliance. I don't think that's a short-term, I don't think, given where we are financially, that is possible in the short term. But, you know, this 2022 plan I have with regards to the ITA budget will help with that. So that's where I am in terms of that. And so I don't want to say that Defender is a thing that's going to free me up to take more cases or to work cases, because I'm trying to get out of working cases if I can to bring myself into compliance. Defender will track all of those other things.
I pointed that out, Peter, just to remind everybody that that is what's happening. You're taking the caseload, but the more we can get off your plate for handling things, it may not get us in compliance, but it'll keep your sanity in place.
Oh, that was gone long ago.
Yeah. So with that said, I'd like to catch on a couple of things for the commission. One, when it comes to the cell phones, I think that we've been moving in that direction quite a while with this commission for our people. I think we need to make sure that they have those for many different reasons. So I don't know if we want to call that a request or not. I tend to think of that one as maintenance. I also think of the desks and chairs as maintenance, because we asked him to go out and do the interns, and we have to be able to provide for the stuff that we requested for him to do. The next one would be the Defender case management. I can see how that may be considered a request, and I have no problem being it as a request still at this time, but I will be definitely in support of it, because I think it's necessary for what we need to do. And you know, the capital being about 15, so the ongoing for the future is about 15 grand, 14 grand that we're looking at. I think that's a huge benefit for what we get out of it. So I don't know if you want to move it forward or just keep it in request until the end, but I definitely be in support of that. And I want to ask the commission that perhaps we get together. I think, Kevin, that you serve on the committee that would be handling this, and maybe we go off of what your request is, but it might be important for us to put together a letter requesting some type of funding for what's happening over there at that clinic over there for the case management that's being handled. You're on mute, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to do is see how the rest of the contract year plays out, and be ready to renegotiate that when it comes open, and just make sure that we're getting the right reimbursement rate, as Peter was talking about. So it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on over the next couple of months, and just make sure that we're handling it in the most effective way possible. But I think there will be an opportunity to, as Peter was talking about, I think there will be an opportunity to potentially, consider adding staff based on those reimbursements. Whether we, can get that fully funded through that reimbursement, or if we have to, split it 50-50. Either way, I think it would be a wise investment, because it's not going anywhere.
And you're the one that's on that committee too, so I support the direction you want to go with this. I think it's smart for us to do it at the right time, the right place. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And and then on the requests, definitely supportive of the Defender software and the cell phones. I know it's a small ticket item, but we're not sure we're going to get those interns yet. And if we get them, we could find $1,000 before they start to do that, rather than putting that in there now and then having having 3 desks and chairs and everything kind of take up more room in Peter's office without anybody filling them. So I'd be comfortable moving those first 2 and then holding off on the furniture.
So are you saying, for my, and I'll support the thing on the furniture as well, but are you saying move it to maintenance now, the Defender?
Yes.
Okay.
And then just confirm the cell phone number, but I'm supportive of that as well. I think that's a big issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Defender software, working with the prosecutor's office too, I think having those linked together is very important so that you guys can keep track and guide that. And
I think it's going to help them out too. Like, honestly.
It honestly would. And then honestly, I'm a little confused why you guys don't already have cell phones for your attorneys. So I absolutely support that one. Everybody else has cell phones. We should have provided you with cell phones before this, in my opinion. But and then holding off on the office furniture is fine with me. If we do get somebody, if COVID goes away and we can all, it won't go away. When we can all return to our offices, I think bringing this back would be proper after an intern is hired.
Fair enough.
Okay, so just to recap, we are moving PLR 1 for the Defender into maintenance and 2 for the cell phones into maintenance, and holding off on PLR 3 for the extra desks. Correct.
Agreed.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Peter, I always appreciate doing the budget with you each year. Each year you always find a way to work within what you can. We trust your requests, I got to tell you. And I want to remind the other commissioners, it didn't always used to be that way. I know I've said that each year, but as we watch it again and again, it's amazing how you're able to still keep it together. By now, we'd have been at 3 times the budget if we'd have continued in the path we were going some years before we brought you into this position.
I was very proud that I made it through 2019 without doing a supplemental budget request, and I'm on track to do the same in 2020, and I consider that a point of pride.
In 2018, we were getting one every month.
Well, 2018, I was still the administrator, but we only got one, but it was big.
Well, we got asked, the person you replaced asked us constantly every time we had a meeting.
I started in 2017.
No, but I mean, the one that replaced the administrator that you replaced.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
That was crazy times. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, I'll log off and go back to doing the rest of my job.
There you go. And thanks for doing your job, and please thank those other members of your team.
I will do so. I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Yep.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to the Sheriff Department then?
I'm ready if you're ready.
Okay, Travis, are you ready? Okay, so we are here for the 2021 Sheriff Department Budget Workshop. And we have, since we first logged on, Jason Dracoby logged in. And I believe that's the only new addition, unless you have others with you, Travis, that you would like to introduce.
We've got a couple extra people here. Sorry, we got a little feedback going on here. Can you try hitting mute on that? Does that help any? No, it does not.
Okay. Okay.
And with that, I'm going to open up the worksheet, or I'm sorry, the PowerPoint that you shared yesterday.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And you're welcome to start with the PowerPoint, or we can go over your PLRs, whatever you would like to do, Sheriff's Office.
If we could start with the PowerPoint, we just wanted to give you, give everyone an overview before we start going through the PLRs. Excuse me. Just giving you some context of how we came up with the numbers. Jennifer, can you click through those slides, or can I?
I will have to do that, I believe. Oh, actually, I might be able to well, I can just click through them. Just
Okay. Okay. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide. Now that I've been in this position for a little longer, being able to do the budget a little differently helped me understand and where the sheriff's office is maybe needed to move some funding around. I needed to understand what the sheriff's office did. So having done some analysis on the mandates that have been coming down from the state legislature over the last few years, is where these numbers came from. We also had a number of conversations within the command staff about what we needed to do and how many people we needed over the next couple of years. So that's what's you're going to see. On the next slide, you'll see what our organization looks like right now. This is 96 FTEs in 4 divisions. I think most people are fairly cognizant of how we're set up. The span of control is pretty typical for a sheriff's office. On the next slide, though, you'll see that those FTE counts have declined. They declined over a period of time, and they've started to go back up. And I don't know if you can see the far side of that slide.
You can't.
But
Let me see if I can move this. There we go.
But the largest part of our request for 2021 is in FTEs, is people that we're going to need to have to take care of some of the mandates that are coming down. Excuse me. This slide also shows a percentage of the budget. Those are defined budgets. So those are only the budget numbers that came out of departments and other offices. So it's a percentage of all the offices, and just gives you kind of an overview of what the sheriff's office has been facing over the last few years. On the next slide, are the FTEs that we'll be talking about. So the 2 transport deputies for when we open Building 10, the CSO for cameras, and we'll probably discuss that more fully when we go through PLRs. Clerk for the Belfair office, Chief Buyer can discuss more fully when we go through the PLRs, but essentially we're having difficulty getting and keeping volunteers for that office. And in order to keep that office open, we'd like to see a permanent position there. And then there's the mental health officer for someone to both go out on calls and help our internal people. The next slide shows some of our call volumes and some of the things that that they're dealing with. So things are continuing to, calls are continuing to increase. there's a continued increase in workload. So if we don't start looking at increasing FTEs, who we can only speculate as to, what that might look like in the future, especially if we have to go back to being locked down and other difficulties like that. We also wanted to remind the commission that we're still where we were with the jail. We're continuing to promote not promote really, but have the EHM program for people that can serve their sentence at home. And so that is actually a bit revenue generating. Not the reason for it, but certainly helpful. And then the last slide is just an overview of the fully loaded estimates of those FTEs. So unless there are questions, we can move to the PLRs.
There's no questions yet, but I'm sure they'll come.
Okay.
Okay, so I changed the share to your PLR spreadsheet on the expenditures, since all of the revenues we have moved into maintenance. So
Okay.
So we're on the expenditures if you want to explain your PLR ask.
Okay, so the first PLR is for the clerk in the welfare office. That is based on a clerk step level 1 and the benefits that go along with that. Do we want to do questions as we go, or do you want to go through all of them?
Commission.
Through them, and then if we do have questions that pop up, we can ask. But I think we have been just going through and saving questions for the end.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what they are first and then go back over them one at a time,
Okay.
as we've done in the past.
Chief Fire, did you want to expand on that explanation for the clerk at all? Okay. Okay, so if we scroll down, then PLR 2 are some additional purchases that we had to have for remote software. Those are phones and remote access software. WASPIC accreditation and registration and tuition, those are small expenditures. They're just a little bit underfunded over the last 3 years. PLR 3 is for the CSO. That CSO is necessary to do the redaction and other work involved in body and vehicle cameras, which is another part of the PLR ask. PLR 4 is the mental health officer. That salary was based on it's based on an estimate of a mental health officer in this area on when I looked in some internet, did an internet search of what we thought that person might be doing. PLRs 5 and 6 have to do with patrol overtime, both during regular hours and holiday hours, with having not enough FTOs or not enough FTEs available in the field. We've just had people have to expend overtime in order to cover the calls and the benefits that go with that. So where it says 3 through 6, those are all of the benefits for positions in patrol. PLR 7 are the body and vehicle cameras, and we actually got a new quote today with tax, that's closer to 780,000. Now we do need to, if we do the cameras, or when we do the cameras, we are going to have that FTO assigned to it. We just don't have the staff to have the cameras and not have the FTE. I keep saying FTO. FTE. PLRs 8 and 9 and the associated benefits underneath that are for the transport deputies for when we open building 10. I believe the last we heard on that one was that was going to open the first of the year, and we're going to need to hire people to be ready for that. Additionally, there is some overtime involved until we get those positions hired. And as I'm sure you know, hiring positions for the sheriff's office has been time consuming and a bit difficult. So we need to get ahead of that. PLR 12 are some underfunded mandates, particularly in healthcare and as they relate to COVID. So our healthcare supplies, we have to have the PPE, not only for jail staff, but for inmates. So we increased that one. We do have a couple of contractual increases for our nursing staff and food supplies, but the rest are based on 3-year averages. So 13, that's a contractual increase in the food services contract. And then the last PLR is for registration and tuition for some of our traffic deputies. So that's very high level. We can go through those individually and talk to them specifically if you'd like. The chiefs have quite a bit more information.
So a couple of those, didn't we already discuss them? Talking about the increase in the healthcare and nursing, or is that additional?
So you've signed the new HDS contract, but it wasn't in the 2020 budget because it doesn't go into effect until January 1st.
So that's a maintenance
Right.
we've already agreed on. So that probably should be moved over.
So the 25,000, it's, what is that? It's
Yes, it's line.
In with 12.
Yes, it's line 340, I believe.
Okay.
Cheryl, or I guess if Chief Hansen is there, question on the $52,000 increase for food services in the jail. That seems like a high number. Is that the standard increase that's in the contract that you've already been in? What's that related to? Kind of give me a little bit more detail on why that jump this year.
So that contractual increase actually covers 2020 and 2021. We didn't have the increase. We didn't have the new contract until I want to say it was May of this year. So that contractual increase is actually for 2 years.
Didn't we already discuss this as well?
Yes, when we had the contract signed back in, I believe it was May of this year.
So would that not also be maintenance?
Yeah, I remember having the discussions on it and stuff. And I'm okay with having it being moved over to maintenance, but I just want to put out, being here for a while, the numbers just keep going up very, very high. It'd be nice to to see what it looks like historically, so we can have an overall picture of what's going on here. And I know that the last time we talked about it, I know I asked the chief to start looking at options, because this price is going up higher and higher. We're not servicing as many inmates as we used to. And I'd like to see some breakdown eventually, maybe in a briefing, where we can have this discussion. But for the moment, I'm comfortable with putting it over into maintenance, because I do believe that when we did the contract, we agreed to do that.
Yeah, Commissioners, Chief Hansen, the cost of the food is still under $2 a meal. Most of those increases have come because of a 3% increase in the labor expenses over the last 2 years, as well as the cost of food has gone up in the last 18 months. So, you know, we may see a little reduction this year just because our inmate population is so low. But as a general matter, we're still paying less than $2 a meal for all the food over there.
I appreciate that. If you don't mind, maybe you can share with me later where we were historically with it. But again, I'm comfortable with moving it forward. I think we already had this discussion and agreed. And when we agree, we need to honor that.
Right.
So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, just no issue with me, but that's a big number. And since we discussed that several months ago, I thought it was important to at least talk about why that number is what it is. So it is maintenance. No argument there.
Sure.
I'm going to ask a different question. Is the sheriff in there?
Yes.
Hi, Sheriff. This could be for you or the undersheriff. As you know, historically, we're trying not to increase capacity at this moment, especially until we see what's happening with the state legislature and what they're going to put upon us. But if you, and I know you guys never like this question, but it's a realistic question I got to ask. If you had an absolute priority of one or two positions, could you share with me which ones you think those are? And it may not be positions. It may be the overtime. It may be something else. But if you had a priority of one or two, could you share that, please?
Sure. So we've already briefed on the corrections deputies positions. So you guys are aware that when that facility opens down there, we need to have the corrections deputies in order to do the transports. So certainly that's high on the priority list. Again, that comes down to a question of timing. Our request for the CSO to manage the video processing, again, that comes down to a question of are we going to purchase the video equipment and get ahead of that curve, or are we not? So clearly that position would be contingent upon that discussion about the video cameras. I think we do have some more discussion around the video cameras to be had. Obviously that was a close to $800,000 PLR that's in here, but I know that that's more of a discussion piece at this point. We do know that other counties are putting in to use CARES money to purchase the camera equipment. Okanagan County just recently put in for that and has approved that through their commission based on the arguments that they made. So there's probably more question to be had about that.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's huge. Could you please keep track of that and find out if they get reimbursed? That's the big question, is whether they'll be reimbursed for it. If they will, we need to jump on that and not lose that opportunity.
Well, I would probably have to defer to Frank a little bit on that, because it's my understanding that by the time we know whether or not it gets reimbursed, the ship has already sailed. So it's one of those things where you have to hope you justify it and then pay for it, and you might get reimbursed if they agree with you, is my understanding. I don't think that they would be reimbursed in time for us to know and meet the deadline to also take advantage of that funding opportunity. So I don't know how that would work.
I'll keep up on that with Frank. That's interesting, because we literally could get and again, I'm sorry to interrupt on this, but through the other commissioner, we could really literally get everything in place and pull the trigger if it happens, and pull it for this year. But we'd have to do supplemental or something probably to cover that. I'm not sure how we do that. Frank's not on, but I'd sure love to. That would sure take a huge weight off of this commission if that is possible to do and know we'd get reimbursed for it.
Yeah, so it was Frank who actually sent us the information about Okanagan County and having that go through over there. I think the other issue that comes along with that is the money is contingent upon us getting that equipment in and getting the invoices in. And unfortunately, with a lot of people jumping on the video bandwagon right now due to all the issues in the world, if you don't do it sooner rather than later, you may not be able to be eligible for that funding because you can't get the equipment in time. But,
yeah, we don't have to have the equipment in. We have to have it paid for. So if we get the invoice and have it paid for before that date, that's what the trigger is for the reimbursement. So
Yeah, I have serious concerns about that one. I don't know that it would be a CARES, that it would be CARES eligible. And so I would hesitate to bank on that one or even think that we might get it. I've spoken to some of our contacts at the legislature. They think that the cameras are going to be likely. However, there could also be some funding coming through. So I don't want to jump too fast into something, and especially I don't want to jump into something that's going to CARES won't cover it. I can pretty much guarantee that. I don't think that Tony Hansen with Commerce would say that that's a good use for the CARES money.
well, and I don't disagree with the commissioner. I'm just saying if it does happen, if they do get reimbursement, then it'd be a shame if we weren't prepared to take advantage of that. If they do get reimbursement, I don't see how they can, but hey, if they do.
well, I do know that Frank got a copy of the language that they used in order to meet the points that were the requirement under the CARES Act, and he has that documentation. I'm not advocating one way or the other or saying that that is going to be reimbursed, only that another county has done it and other places are moving in that direction. So I wanted to, it goes to Commissioner Netherland's question about the priorities on those positions.
So
that CSO position is kind of contingent upon that question.
So corrections deputies and CSO for that position if we move forward there.
Yes, I would also, I'll speak to the other two positions real briefly. One of them being the clerk in the north end of the county. We've had the great benefit of being able to keep that office open for many years with the use of a great contingent of hardworking volunteers up in the north end. In the not too recent past, we've had quite a few volunteers who've moved on to other opportunities, have moved out of the area, or just simply are no longer available. And quite frankly, we're just not able to fill staffing for the north end of the county with volunteers completely at this point. We still got a great group up there that are working hard. We just can't keep the office open for the type of hours that we believe that the north end deserves at this point. The north end is growing. There's a lot of people up there. Our office is always busy up there, and it's our belief that the north end of the county really deserves to be represented up there with a full-time employee to serve their needs without having to come down here. So the final position, and this is one that we've been researching for quite some time. It's the mental health position. This will be the first time that you've heard about it. Frankly, it's the first time I think that we've discussed it openly in a public type meeting. We've been researching this for quite some time now. As you guys are aware, mental health issues and law enforcement dealing with people with mental health issues is a very high liability area for us. It's a very high liability area for the county. And the question for us has been, how do we respond to this high liability area effectively? There's some programs that have worked around the country being embedded mental health workers, where the mental health workers are employed by mental health providers. They come out and ride with law enforcement and make contacts of law enforcement individuals to help with that type of response. That model seems to work really well with cities, where they can hop in with an officer and they can travel 2 minutes one way, 6 blocks, and contact somebody in 5 minutes another direction. Unfortunately, in a county our size, where we're so spread out, the ability for a mental health worker to hop in the car and do effective work by riding with a deputy and contacting people is not super high. We consulted with several of our local doctors. We consulted with a whole bunch of people in the mental health field, counselors, mental health providers, organizations. We talked to Dr. States, who many of you have come in contact with. And what everyone in the field seems to agree upon is that the real problem that we have is the connection between our law enforcement folks and the mental health field in general. And what we're proposing is a case manager who can be that person who is our connection from the sheriff's office to the broader mental health community, whether it's the providers, whether it's the individual people who can provide services, connection to the hospitals, and can work with the law enforcement. And pretty much everyone that we have discussed this with, be it the doctors or the providers, have said that they think that that's a model that would be super beneficial to Mason County and to those people in our community who need mental health services. So I'm kind of throwing that out there as a conversation starter, some way to bring that to the commission and hope that we can have broader conversations about that.
Just as an opinion for that one, because I'm not sure that we'd be looking at it as much this year, as you said, more of a conversation starter. It would also, I know this wouldn't check all the boxes for having a liaison right there in your office, but I think the idea of having mental workers with us at certain times is extremely necessary. So we might want to perhaps look into contracting, at least as a beginning, to have somebody that would be able to be there in your office as a ride along or something, just the beginning, to see if it works and how it would work. And that's just an idea.
Yeah, we've talked to several of the doctors and the mental health providers about that. The real concern that we had about that particular model is that the funding is so inconsistent that the ability for any of those organizations to provide some sort of consistency is very difficult. But again, I'm not throwing out any option. I'm not saying that's a bad option, just that we've had those conversations, and that's one obstacle that we have in that area.
And you had them with Peninsula Health, because I know that they're doing the mental health out of North Mason area up there at the schools and stuff like that, and they're contracting out. Have you had those conversations with them at all? Yeah,
we were looking at kind of the whole county holistically, but certainly our connections with the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization, the organizations in the North End, our former Telecare, our other local mental health providers. And that's kind of the problem. Our deputies don't know who to go to this week because that particular provider is getting funding, and next week it's somebody else and different phone numbers. And we really need somebody here in the county who can be that consistent point of contact, regardless of who this week's provider happens to be based on.
I agree with you there, and I've seen it myself here recently, especially. The one I'm talking about is the Kitsap and Peninsula Health, the new organization that came in 2 years ago up there. They're actually an actual funded one, not a independent nonprofit. So
They're on a call out basis for us for the opioid.
Yes.
We don't have the mental health piece of it. They just have the opioid addiction piece of it.
And perhaps and that's my point, perhaps we could talk to them about the mental health aspect, because I believe they're doing that. And again, I'm not, it's just an idea, because I'd like to see us, even if we're not doing anything now, I definitely like to see us do something in the short term soon.
Well, and you know, the other reason I say this is a conversation starter is because I have heard that there are other streams of revenue out there that perhaps we could tap into for this particular type of position. And so I'd be willing to talk to anybody that could about how we can make that happen.
Thank you.
So
one other thing, the sheriff wanted to talk about the camera thing for a second.
I'm a little bit out of the screen here, but commissioners, I think one of the things I believe Commissioner Trask and I have both followed on this a little bit. Relative to the body cams, I was going to try to read you the memo that I have, or the statement I have by Steve Strand, the director of WASPIC. I'm going to not quote it exactly, but one of the things the sheriffs and police chiefs across the state have been looking at on that camera issue is that the sheriffs and chiefs that have those have found that it saved them a tremendous amount of money in lawsuits because of liability issues involved in not having them. But additionally, WASPIC, the chiefs and sheriffs have approached the legislature and it's currently being talked about in the legislature now about funding that. And the legislature has talked back about requiring all agencies to have those, but the possibility of funding may not be there. And so it may be a mandate. So the Chiefs and Sheriffs Association is pressing really hard in the legislature that if there is a mandate, that the state cover the cost of those cameras. But as Steve pointed out, that most of the things that the state puts out as a mandate do not come with funding. So it's just something that we're monitoring along that line as we're talking to you about that request and some of the other things that other counties have done to keep in mind. But I'm not sure that I think the probability is if they do mandate that for all agencies in the state, that it's believed right now that it's going to be likely it'll come with no funding. But it is something that every chief and sheriff in the state has pushed forward to the legislature requesting that funding. We just haven't heard anything back, and maybe Commissioner Trask has maybe heard more on that. But we're really monitoring that because we think it's going to be a huge issue across the state of Washington for all law enforcement agencies.
Right. Yeah, I did speak to someone that's in the know, and he said that if there is funding, it'll probably go to local government, so cities, probably not counties, because of course counties have so much money and they can mandate us to do everything without unfunded mandates. So I think it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. But whether or not we get funding for it could be another issue.
If we hear something, it should change it. Whether there's a funding source, we will certainly be the first to let you know, because we would rather have the state put that out as well. But just something that came through the other day from Steve Strand at WASPIC. They're working on it.
Yeah, I believe they have a task force right now working on it. So we'll see where that task force, if they get anywhere.
And commissioners and sheriff's office, I do want to add that I have an email out to Department of Commerce asking if the cameras would be CARES Act funding eligible. And I just summarized the briefing document that was sent over.
Thank you.
The briefing document that was sent over using Okanagan's framework, or?
I'm not sure. It was written by Jason, by Chief Drockett.
Yes, we shamelessly stole the
no, that's good.
language that they used.
That's good because, you know, I'm a firm believer it's how you word it sometimes, whether or not they're going to accept it. And if they happen to have found the right words, that's what we're going to capitalize on, I would hope.
And if it's not the right words, then it's their fault and not ours.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Well, as Commissioner Trask said, it seems very unlikely. Actually, she was even stronger than that, and I would agree with her. But you know what? If somebody finds the right recipe and pulls it off, I certainly want to jump on the bandwagon, copy, paste, and get it in. So.
Oh, we all like a good recipe, especially if it doesn't go flat.
So I'll keep you all updated on the response that I get.
Thank you.
Great. So I just have a few items that I want to kind of jump in on here. So again, I'll just kind of echo the conversation on the body cams. I do think they have tremendous value in our day and age, in not only protecting the public, but certainly in protecting our deputies as well. And so kind of see where this conversation takes us and what we hear back on that before we make a decision. One of my two questions in particular, though, on the body cams, before I move into the other issues that I have comments on. What is, Chief Drackley, what is the lifespan of both the body and dash cams?
Should be up. We should get at least, well, we'll get more than one cycle out of them. And I'm hoping to get 2 cycles, which would be upwards of 8 to 10 years.
Okay. Okay. And then
it's technology, and technology changes. So, you know.
But if it, I mean, I would be hoping, when you say 8 to 10 years, I think that's fantastic. I was hoping for 5. So I think that's, if we're in that 5 to 10 year range, I think that's a successful capital purchase given the use and some of the rigors that they're put through.
Well, I'm truly hoping that it lasts at least 8 years. That way I can retire and won't have to worry about the next set.
Well, same here. So I can't fault you that. So, so for the records portion of the cameras, how did you land on a CSO for that versus a records clerk versus, walk me through kind of the process there and why you think that's the right direction in order to kind of manage that program.
So
honestly, we came up with the CSO just more for making sure that we have operational control on it, on the cameras, making sure that all the downloads are working, and that person could then help with the clerks on doing any PDR stuff that needs to be done and working with the software. I wasn't looking at it specifically as a clerk who would just operate it and just do the PDR side of it. It's going to be somebody who manages that system and treats it just like it's evidence.
Mm-hmm. And how
additionally, Commissioner Schutte, a CSO and a clerk position are approximately the same cost.
Okay. And then how do you view it kind of interfacing with our county IT program? I mean, is this something that you would have Deputy Heilman working on, or is this something that our county IT would be working on, some combination of the two? How do you see that working?
So right now, what's in front of you at $780,000 would be a cloud-based storage system. It would not involve our current county IT. I know I'd earlier discussed using county IT. If we do use county IT, there's going to be a lot of logistics of making sure the software is pointed in the right direction, that the county IT orders the servers it needs. Those servers are going to cost with licensing, cost somewhere between $160,000 and $170,000. And I've talked to TJ, they're capable of doing it. The setup time and stuff is just going to take time to purchase the equipment, set it up, and then make sure that the company is talking with our IT and pointing.
And you're on the you're typing your internet.
And we can see we can
see your email, Jen.
Sorry. He already put
Thanks
it
for
in
sharing.
the email.
So
I don't think it's
Frank is,
confidential.
just so you know, Frank is out today. He has some medical issues going on, so we'll excuse him.
So, thanks. That wasn't me. I was looking at it going, what? Did I answer your question? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked.
That's okay. We all did. That's all right.
Thanks for saving me, Jen. So the package that's in front of you, if for some reason CARES Act gives a thumbs up and says, hey, go with it, this would be the quickest way to implement it and get it up and running and get it set up and working. If we look at it for next year and it's put into the budget for next year, we can work with county IT. It's probably going to be about 60,000 less, but there's going to be more upfront cost for that year.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then I appreciate all that. We'll kind of wait and see how that works out with hearing back from Commerce and all that good stuff. So I appreciate the continued legwork you're doing on this. I think it's an important issue. And so just we'll keep after it. On to the corrections deputy positions. Again, I'm happy to hear that would probably be your top priority. It would be my top priority for funding in your budget for next year. My question is, and I haven't had this conversation with either of the commissioners or with budget staff, and I'm just going to throw it out there now. Why not a supplemental request to add those positions this year, given the hiring challenges, so that they're potentially up and ready to go when the building is open early next year?
We can do that for sure.
Well,
A supplemental rather than, I mean, we can do a supplemental and put it in next year's budget.
The sheriff's office's thought was on that.
What was that, Kevin?
I said I appreciate Jen, saying that, but I was curious what the sheriff's office's thoughts were on trying to get that taken care of in this, as a supplemental this year. So
I think, commissioners, you are all aware of the hiring challenges that we have. It takes us a significant amount of time to get a corrections deputy hired through the process. Currently, we don't even have any eligible people on the list that we're aware of. And I can't imagine that it would take us less than 6 months at this point to get another list established, get people on there who are qualified to get hired. And it's not just a question of getting them hired, but we have to have them trained and prepared and ready to go before the transports begin. So I appreciate Commissioner Schuette's position, simply because we need to get that ball rolling as soon as we possibly can.
Commissioner Schuette, I might add, this is Sheriff out of view here. I might add also onto what Travis has put forward, that in the last couple months, the sheriffs in the region, the sheriffs across the state of Washington as well, are really struggling the question is out there. If anybody can find a corrections officer and you found them, please let us know how. I know that our Region 3 partners, I've talked to each one of them, they are struggling greatly to even find people applying for corrections jobs. And so they had said, if we ever find a stream or a source of people, to please direct them to the other sheriffs in our region. So we are all working to find staffing right now.
Yeah, and I guess that's just why I wonder, if, again, want to hear from Commissioners Netherland and Trask on it, but if it wouldn't make more sense, if we're agreeable to it, to begin that process now versus waiting until January 1, when you're potentially looking, mid-year for that. So I just try to be mindful of, that opening and what that might cause, for your office, but for the courts as well. And just trying to maybe get out in front of that a little bit.
I'll chime in on that. I don't think we have to have a supplemental in order to pull that off. We just have to allow them to create the position. No money will be spent this year because it takes a while to get that position into place. That's why originally I was thinking myself of, maybe 1.5 into the budget this year, because it will take them time to be able to even get it manned. One would even cover it because they'll probably get, partway through the year before they get the first one, partway through the year before they get the second, but 1 to 1.5 in the actual budget for this year, or for the budget we're working on. But I think we could just tell them that they can hire a position without adjusting.
Commissioner Netherland, this is Chief Hansen again. You're absolutely right. There is no way in heck we're going to be able to spend any additional funds this year. We already have one position that's currently open, and there's only one person on the civil service eligibility list. So I don't even think we're going to be able to spend that money on the open position this year. So I tend to agree with what you're saying there.
But I would also throw in there, however, that I agree with your other point as well. They are continually doing testing, and we never know what's going to come up on the list. And so if you were agreeable to at least putting those positions in the books so that we could start that process if they were became available on the list. That would be very helpful. For sure.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of that, because I just think, given those challenges, we don't want to be behind the curve any more than we already are when Building 10 opens for court. So just I would be completely supportive of you moving forward with getting everything in order for those positions.
Right, and I think regardless, with it opening just because of COVID, I think those positions are going to be needed for years down the road, because you will still have to transport to that building. So I support that 100% too.
And then a couple of other things regarding the mental health officer position, or that position. So I'd like to have a little bit more conversation, because I think, again, here's an opportunity for us to, as we transitioned as a late adopter from what we had been operating under with the BHO for a couple of years, into the new managed care organization realm of providing behavioral health services. I think we have an opportunity to go to the managed care organizations and request assistance on some of these types of issues. I know in other counties that work under this system have been able to have public health nursing funded, a position in public health for a nurse funded through those managed care organizations. And so I'd ask that we be really thoughtful in developing a scope of work for a position like this, so that we can then try to find the right funding source and the right funding partner that's stable. In addition to that, have you had any conversations regarding using treatment sales tax to help with this type of work, given that a lot of it is hopefully going to funnel them into a treatment program? And just kind of curious on your thoughts on that. But I definitely want to continue to dig into this, because I do agree that it's a needed position, and there's the need in our community is going to grow. I mean, we do need to have some stability there for our community generally, but for your deputies as well.
Yeah, we had discussed the possibility that some level of TST funding might be applicable to it. It's just a question of what is, like you said, the scope of work and how we structure that. And so we definitely would like to have some more conversations around that. Like I said, we have had conversations with Dr. States, a whole number of mental health providers that have worked in this county from various organizations, and they all agreed that the idea that we were contemplating is definitely would be the right way to go for a rural county such as ours. So if we could have some more conversation about that, I would very much appreciate it.
Commissioner, this is Sheriff again. I think another thing that I want to add in there is just a small piece, but kind of significant, that I had long conversations with Dr. States about, and I think that you've sat in on those as well, is that the position isn't just, I don't want to leave it there that it's just riding around a patrol car or something. I think the other part behind that we're seeing, that I think that the chief would in the jail would see as a benefit, as well as the individual themselves. Our goal is that we don't have that person in the system forever, that we find them the help that we need. That's where the efficiency comes in. But the follow-up to that of having that position, however it works within the county, is that oftentimes connecting those, we need that middle person that connects them into a service that follows up on their treatment as they leave the jail, or as they leave our connection somehow, have those followed up services. And when I read the articles on that, talk to Dr. States, that's an area where we really fall off. The person, we see them, we get them some services. I'll just use the jail for an example. They step away from the jail where we have somebody in there, and then they are back in the community, and within a few days we see them again, because there's not a follow-up connection person that follows up with those additional services and makes those contacts for them. And that was a very key role in that position.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, I don't know if this is the most current term, but a term to associate with that would be, intensive case management.
Yes.
And somebody who is going to help you navigate the system, make sure that you're making your appointments, make sure that you're, you know, on your meds, make sure that you're, you know, making the right follow-ups and everything. And so, you know, it really what we need in this position could be a really important part of that. But we need to look at what, you know, where the gap is in the system at the system level, and start to kind of plug in that way. And so I think it's really exciting to hear you're talking about it. Really exciting to hear what, you know, what potential opportunities might be out there. And so who would be the most appropriate point of contact in your office to continue this conversation?
That would be me.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Travis.
Yep, no problem.
I think that's all I have for right now.
So are we making any decisions on any more PLRs right now, besides we have I think it was 25,000 for part of PLR number 12 on.
Jennifer, something that I'd like to do and hope the commission would allow us to do is finish on this discussion just on these positions. And then I'd love for you to actually do what you've been doing all the way through this process. And that is start with one and start going down the list. And because there's some of these things on here, I'm going to want your reasonings for the numbers that you chose. And so I'd rather do them one at a time and then address them as the commission.
And just to be clear, I did not choose the PLR numbers in here. All of the departments have numbered those either in sequential order or in order of priority. So,
yeah, but don't you usually when you have a different number that you're putting in there, you were explaining to us why.
Oh, the amount.
Yeah.
Oh, the dollar amount.
Yeah.
Well,
because
okay.
you have different things, and that's what I'd like to do. So if you don't mind with the commission, I'd like to ask that we finish on this part and then ask her to go down individually.
Okay, perfect. And then I just wanted everybody to be mindful of time. I don't know how you're feeling about it, commissioners, but we're already, you know, a half an hour. We started late and we're, you know, at 10:31. So just wanted to.
I think we can go through this quick. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump in on some of the stuff that I would like to see. One of the first things we discussed, it's not actually for the budget, but I'd like to allow them to open up for one position right away. On the budget and how it'd be handled, we need to always keep track of the monies that are actually being spent, not just what we want to put in for positions and want to spend money. So what I'd like to see us consider, and my recommendation is we put this to the PLR and make the final decision at the end, not today, but if we agree on something cut in now, then we know where we're going. I'd like to see us, I know eventually we'd like to have the discussion adding 2 corrections officers, but for the budget, if we added 1 correction officer and full-time into it, they hire one in, one gets in 6 months, that's only using up 0.5. It'd be very easy for us to bring on another one mid-year, if that's what we decided to do. But for the budget for now, to have them put 1 in there. Second thing, maybe a little bias on my part, and so that's why I'm saying this up front, that it may be some bias. I do believe that the citizens in the North Mason area should be able to access and do the things that they do at that local office without having to travel for a half an hour. So the idea of having a clerk is important to me if it's a possibility. One last thing I'd like to throw in is on the cameras. Commissioner Schutte, you made the comment about you were happy with 5 years. That's the number I was actually looking for too. So it's funny you say I was impressed with 8, but just in case it is something that becomes a higher turnover, we might want to have some considerations with an ongoing contract so that somebody's maintaining them and upgrading as necessary, like we're doing with the cars. Those are my opinions on the positions.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and kind of follow up with you there, Commissioner. You know, so my preference would be to put the 2 funded direct corrections deputies in there, not do the 0.5. I think that makes it cleaner going forward. You know, and kind of states what our commitment is to that. You know, in what I guess would be the 22 budget. Hard to think about that far ahead, but in the 22 budget, we would know, you know, that this was truly a 2 position add. and I would be interested to hear from the sheriff's office, I guess, well, let me say it like this. If I had to choose between, if we're going to go down the route of the body cameras and the dash cameras, we know we're going to need, a position to manage that. Is that a position that can be housed in the Belfair office to run the program and manage some of the office duties up there, kind of, at the same time, to give us a little bit of time to evaluate both and kind of how we get there to get that, get that office staffed. If is that an option?
Honestly, I don't believe so. I think that the management of that, the evidence system, as well as all the videos, is going to be at least a full-time job. And there's no way that they could, the amount of concentration and time that it takes to pour over those videos and work on public disclosure requests and things, really doesn't work with somebody who'd be getting yanked up to the counter every 2 minutes when somebody walks into the north end of the substation. I just don't think that would work.
Kind of along those lines, do you have data on how many walk-ins and direct calls you get to the Belfair office annually?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to ask. I would have to ask Chief Buyer for that data, but I'm sure that she does, because she keeps pretty good records on how busy the volunteers are up there. But she's gone on another volunteer project right now, so.
We do have that data. It's just not with us right now, but we can get it from Chief Buyer, because when I was in the North End, I got to see all that data on a yearly basis.
Commissioner, the only data that I have firsthand is when that office door closed, we get calls down here like you can't believe.
Yeah.
And they don't understand they're volunteers. So
right.
There's a certain amount of real life data that happens. If we shut that office for a day, how many people are calling down here wanting to know why it's closed and why we're not funding that, and not understanding oftentimes that those are volunteers.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. But if you could forward that, if you whatever you have, I'd be interested in taking a look at it. And
yeah, I'll talk to Chief Buyer. I
guess as the world stands right now, with the uncertainty on how we're going to proceed with the body cam program, I would hew towards the clerk position for up there, and then let the chips fall where they do on the body cams later on. So just a couple of initial thoughts.
And Commissioner Schutte, you stole my idea. I don't know whether you're reading my mind or what, but that's kind of a scary thought too. But thanks for answering the question about the CSO for the video, and then the clerks. I was going to ask that as well.
I would just point out, commissioners, that just be mindful that the body cams and the CSO position are pretty inextricably linked. There's no way that we can manage the system without the CSO. So if you opt that direction, which I certainly wouldn't balk at a bit, I would appreciate it. Still, just be mindful of that fact.
Right.
Great. Yep, absolutely. And then I do think that the two transport deputies are essential. I don't think there's a question that they are needed. But the body cams, I think I'd like to hold off a little bit until we can get confirmation. If we can use CARES money for that, that would be great. And then if I'm not looking, it's not looking good that the counties will get money from the state to help with, it'll be another unfunded mandate. It'd be kind of fun to take a look at all the unfunded mandates that you guys have that have been forced upon you.
We have a list if you'd like it.
I know you've sent it to me before, but I think there's been more added since the last time.
It's many pages long,
120 days.
Yeah. Which is, I think we should send that to the legislators and let them know too.
Yes.
But the mental health officer, I think that if we can find it, I think that's an essential position as well. But I think if we can find other funding for that, maybe some grants, that would be great.
Just a thought.
So Jennifer, do you want to go over the?
Let me Let me talk about this one more time then on that. I don't disagree on putting in the two positions. That's not the question I'm posting forward. I'm talking about how much money we're putting in the lines. Give you an example. If we were to create these two positions, fully fund them in the budget right now, the odds are they're not going to even fill all three positions because they have one open by June. But if they did fill all three positions, that'd still be 125K approximately out there floating. That's not necessary because it's not going to, it just, in my opinion, is not an appropriate way to put the money out there. I have no problem with how we're setting up how many people, just how much money we're going to put in those lines for this year.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I respectfully disagree on that. I just think it's a cleaner, more transparent way to go about recognizing what those positions cost. And I know it does, it would strain us on some other decisions potentially, but the reality is you're gonna, in all hopefulness, you're gonna have to pay that out fully in 22. And so I would rather have a clearer look at that next year ahead of those potentially being fully funded in 22 than be in a position where, just for the sake of people looking at the budget, wondering how we went from half funding to full funding and that kind of thing. So that's just a personal preference on my part. But I do understand what you're saying, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I understand that too. And I think we are capable of finding a way to make sure it fits in the budget for the long term. But it's 125K cost just to have it, and that's a good case scenario. If they're not able to fill two of them, that's even more money that is just not properly allocated.
Right. So fully loaded, each position would be 85,000, right? 85,000.
No, that's not fully loaded.
Yeah, it
Yes.
is.
Yes,
It's 85K fully loaded with
For an entry level, yes.
yes.
for entry level, but okay, we've learned it doesn't usually work that way, but okay, go ahead.
So I think that we should put those positions in there now. And if we're lucky enough to get somebody, great. Then we've already got it in the budget.
So yeah, 85,000 fully loaded.
And as I said before, they can't get everybody from the beginning of the year. It's just not possible. But again, that's just my opinion. But I am in favor of putting in the positions. That's not.
Well, let me go about it like this. Sheriff's Office, do you have any? I mean, want to weigh in on it? I mean, if you're fine either way, in the kind of in an effort to move things forward and that kind of thing. I mean, what is your preference? I mean,
Well, I'm not sure the interplay between the budget and the civil service. However, there is a concern that the civil service might not view it as an actual position if it's not funded. We would have to look into that. I don't know, the money comes back to you at the end of the year if we don't spend it on wages and benefits anyway. So it seems to me like it would be most reasonable to have those positions funded so that if we do get those people in, or we do get a good list and we get through the hiring, that we don't have to come back to you and make some last minute adjustments. But again, that's your purview.
And we did put them in as entry level, knowing that we probably wouldn't be able to hire them immediately. So if we get somebody really good who wants to walk away from Seattle PD, we can put them in at an appropriate salary.
Yeah, and I would recommend, and I'm sorry if I missed the question earlier, but I would recommend, if you're going to put them into 2020 in the budget, I would recommend either moving salaries from somewhere else into that position, or from wherever you're planning on using that money into that position, and not leaving it open. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that we'd have to do that as a budget supplemental along with our other supplementals first in November.
Well, I mean, you could transfer the funds within your department, or do a supplemental if it's approved by the commission.
We may or may not have money to transfer. So right now we're at about 0.7% underspent is the estimate at this point through the end of September. So we'll have to take a look at that at the end of October.
But there is not going to most likely be a hire. They have one that they're trying to fill now.
Yeah, so if you're going to use those funds, that's what I mean. Like, so thank you for Commissioner for clarifying. I would transfer those funds from that position if it's not going to be funded, and then move those funds in the budget over to the position that you're trying to hire, just so that it's not a
hire that one too. But I think what we want to do is we want to create the positions for them this year so that they could start the process and get them on their way so that they're not having to start January 1st.
Yeah.
A list and testing and training and everything. So we want to get them dialed in now. Whether or not they have people hired by the end of the year is probably unlikely, but it at least gets them moving down that path.
Okay, then yeah, I would definitely do a supplemental for those positions. Or recommend doing that.
Are we all clear on that? Are we all clear on where we're headed with that?
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. So are we doing a budget supplemental for this year for 2 positions or 1?
I believe it's 2.
I mean, I think I'll just maybe kind of sum it up in the way I'm hearing it. So maybe you're doing a supplemental for 2, but you would only essentially be moving 1 month's salary into those positions, I guess is what Jen is saying, even though they're not going to get filled this year. So, I mean, it's basically a paperwork thing.
Shifting from the position that has not been filled. So It's not truly a supplemental, it's a budget a budget line addition.
Which you might not even need. I mean, I guess maybe.
That was kind of my point. I'm wondering why we even need.
But if you need to have those on paper so that you can fill them, I think that's what the undersheriff was talking about, that having those 2 positions.
Yes.
As full-time positions, that way he can go out and ask for more applicants.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think we all agree on that.
Yeah. So what we were discussing was for next year when both of those positions are added into the budget. Do you fund 1 completely and then 1 half of it, understanding that you're likely not going to have somebody in that position for several months? Or do you fund both of those up front, regardless of whether or not they're both created? Well, we got ourselves good and turned around here, didn't we?
So here, Commissioner, I don't know if this will clarify it or just throw one more handful of mud into the water, but the optimistic side of me would like to say that I'm going to find somebody next week and we'll need to start paying them. The realistic side of me says we probably won't find somebody until after the beginning of the year. However, we need to have the positions on the books so that we can start the process now, so that hopefully we can get them through the whole process and start paying them at the beginning of the year. Yeah. So however that works in the bean counter world so that we can do that, totally good with it. Does that help any?
And frankly, I'd like to see the two positions funded at that entry level in case we do something optimistic and find somebody amazing that we want to get in.
For the 21 budget.
Correct.
So maybe in the spirit of time here, maybe we can have Jennifer and Cheryl hammer out the details for how we make this happen to get those positions created for the hiring process for this year. And then we come back when that's figured out by the end of this budget session, or, but before we adopt the budget. So we're all clear, and then make a decision on what the funding levels look like for both of those into next year.
That sounds good to me. I don't know about the other commissioners, but yeah, I would definitely recommend putting them into the budget in full for next year. So it's not, especially because, if it was succession planning or something where it's going to be temporary, like the auditors are asking for, I can see doing a partial year, but because these are going to be permanent full-time positions, I would put them in for the entire year. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that would be my preference as well.
So I'll work with Cheryl on that for this year to see how that'll work with civil service.
Great. Thank you.
If you're good with that, commissioners.
Oh dear, are we freezing?
We froze up.
We could hear her, sort of.
It was a little garbled.
I just got the message that our internet is unstable.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, one more time, what did you say?
So on the civil service, I'll get with Cheryl on that for 2020 to see if we can add those positions in without adding budget.
You're saying civil service. That was said earlier. I'm a little confused. Corrections officers. I've been talking corrections officers.
Yeah, corrections. We have to hire corrections officers through the civil service, and we can't get names off the civil service list unless those positions are established. I was saying I didn't know whether or not if they're unfunded for this year, but they're on the books, if they'll actually allow us to have the names off the list, or if it requires through civil service to have funding in there so that we can get the list. I think that's what they were talking about, hammering out that in order so that we know.
So for 2021, for the budget, for these two corrections officers positions, are we making a decision right now, or are we holding off until we find out more information on this for 2020?
You mean doing a budget supplemental?
I'm talking about the 2021 budget for these two positions for next year's budget. Are we adding them in full into maintenance, or are we holding off? Are we making a decision right now, I guess is what I'm asking.
I have no problem moving them into position now. We've got only a few more that are big that would even have a request like this. But at the same time, my issue again is just the idea of putting money in there that we know won't be used that way, so it'll be used in some other manner. But I have no problem with putting them on now if the other commissioners don't mind.
Yeah, I would say put them in now, and then we can have the other part of that conversation on the funding level of each of those positions for next year a little bit later on. Let's, just handle this part of it, and then, come back to it and see if we can find more consensus on how to fund those next year. But I think they got to go now.
I do want to add, though we're wanting to put these things on now for this year, I am not in favor of doing the same thing for for 2020 is what we're talking for 2021. I do not want to put 170K into their 2020 budget to fill that line. So
I'm in agreement with that, Commissioner.
and it's that same thinking is why I wanted to carry it over to 2021 with the same exact thinking.
Oh yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't thinking we would put 170 in now. I don't think that makes sense. I mean, it would be for whatever, whatever gets it to the point where they can hire, and then the full funding of it for next year. That was my intent.
Yeah, we totally agree with that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was my intent as well. We're close to the end of the year right now, so it would make no sense to me to add them for the entire 2020 year.
No, it would.
Is there any discussion for adding the
It would
clerk?
be at most 2 positions for 2 months. At most.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus that we will add them in for 2021 for now, and then possibly revisit that. And I am segregating the approved PLRs in case you ever, in case you want to go back to them later. So,
Is there any consideration on the clerk?
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. My only concern is I want to wait and see what path we end up going down in the next week or so with the body cameras, because if we have to fund a CSO position, that might change my position. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's necessary. It's needed. I just, from my perspective, would like to see where the body camera conversation takes us, and then make a prioritizing decision based on that.
So we'll agree to put that one on a PLR, because I don't want to have to bring every PLR back again before us that we've already gone through. But maybe highlight a PLR like this one to bring back to us again.
okay.
Yeah, I think that's
I mean, Commissioner Trask, I'm sorry. Did you want to weigh in on that position, on the clerk as well?
Yeah, I think it's necessary, but I also would like to wait to see what we hear back from Commerce.
Okay, great. So we'll wait on that one as a PLR. So that's PLR number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather be in a position where, we're thinking we're going to spend $66,000 on a clerk, and there's another way to pay for the, pay for the $800,000+ for the body cams and the CSO. So, I think it's just it's one of those to be determined things at the moment.
Okay, so then you want to run down quickly and go through these?
Please.
Okay, so on PLR 2, which includes $15,000 for the purchase of additional software, and then the $12,000 for remote access, and then the $2,240 for these 2 items. Is there any thoughts on those?
Yeah, just on the 27,000 for the remote access software, is any of that CARES Act eligible for remote working or to improve that infrastructure? Was any of that cooked into our CARES Act distribution?
What software was it?
Give her a second.
So part of it is part of the software is viewer, and all the software names right in here, but
Are any of you hearing us?
did we lose it?
Yes, I've turned off my camera to widen our bandwidth.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so part of it was TeamViewer and part of it is Adobe. So those are our subscription licenses that we're going to have to continue. So yes, part of them will be covered this year for CARES Fund, but I'm assuming that we're not going to have that type of funding available to us next year. That's why I added it into 2021.
So this is something you can't prepay on. Because this has to be, for it to count towards the CARES money, you have to prepay it now. If it can't be prepaid, then it can't
And then it only goes for a certain amount of time. It can't be for the full year.
That's correct.
So there's still a large sum that does not get covered through CARES.
Correct. And the same is true with the cell fax and internet information. The increase there was for increased access. So while we might get reimbursed for some of that this year, we wouldn't have that available to us next year.
But it's actually costing us 50 grand a year for the license fees to allow for this remote access.
The software is an aggregate of all of our software. So that's everything that the sheriff's office purchases, including the time tracking software. I don't know why I can't think of all of the different kinds of stuff. We have nursing charting software. So that the number that's put in the budget for 2021 is for everything. The increase is all for new software.
Okay, the increase is to cover the situation we're in today. This is okay. I see where you're at for that. I think that's maintenance. If the other commissioners would agree.
I would agree, and then I would just throw in the caveat that if our COVID or if our CARES Act deadline gets extended again, to be prepared to be able to justify reimbursement that way.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yep, sounds good.
I think the additional phones and equipment is going to fall under the same. So I think that's going to be maintenance.
Yeah, I was saying that for both.
Yeah, I was kind of saying that for PLR too.
Well, except for I'm not there yet. I want to understand the rest of this stuff for the underfunded and stuff.
So the rest of the underfunded on 2 is based on 3-year average.
I hate when you do that because I can't argue with you. I mean that in the kindest way. I've told you that last year. I actually appreciate that because what you're doing is you're giving me actual numbers versus what we've normally done. I think those are maintenance. I trust her numbers.
Okay. And other commissioners
I was going to say, that's just my opinion.
Okay. I can delete my comment.
Yeah.
PLR 2 would go under maintenance.
Agreed.
Okay, all of it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to PLR 3, the CSO, we'll hold off on that. That's what I heard.
PLR.
Okay, and then the mental health we'll keep as a PLR.
Yeah.
And so 5 and 6, the overtime, we didn't really discuss that too much. So what are your thoughts on that, or do we need more discussion?
Personally, I think PLR on that. We just added a bunch of other money that's not going to be expended. I don't see any possible way. You still have one open position, and you're going to have part year without at least one of those corrections officers, if not both. So I think PLR.
And this is actually overtime for patrol. So just to clarify.
Yeah, but it's still gonna be the bottom line on wages.
Okay. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Cheryl, if you could maybe provide like a 3-year average or history on overtime.
Certainly.
And I think this year you've had extra difficulties because of the officers that were injured and other issues as well. So I think I see it as necessary, but I'll go with the PLR.
Okay, thank you. So the body and video cameras we're definitely keeping as a PLR for now.
Correct.
So the transport deputies, we will move to maintenance for 2021.
Yep.
And, oh, that's the same thing. So the overtime in here, we didn't really discuss that. Is that the same sentiment as the patrol overtime? Keep it as a PLR?
Yeah,
I think so, because I think the money's there with what we just did.
Contractual, that's contractual overtime. That's holiday overtime, which is.
Isn't holiday overtime contractual? Meaning that you guys negotiated?
Is
Yeah, I
this,
believe
is all of this 18, or is it part of that 18 that's contractual? Because I would agree with you.
All of the $18,000 increase is based on a contractual.
Then maintenance for me.
Okay.
is that the same for patrol?
No, the information for patrol was based on historical numbers.
What about the holiday overtime?
The holiday, I mean.
Right.
The holiday overtime, I'd have to go back and look. I believe it was, but I don't want to say for sure.
Can you find out how much things are for the holiday overtime that's contractual that we just, because we didn't do the contract with both ends of this, we did it with the corrections officers. If there's a dollar amount for that contractual obligation, that should be maintenance.
Yeah, I'll check into it. That patrol contract came in a year and a half ago, so I'm.
Yeah, so that
just
shouldn't
go back
be,
and look at it.
that should not be any different.
But it still increases with their salaries.
And somehow our OIC in corrections didn't get funded this year, so that's why that PLR 10 is in there.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Maintenance, if that wasn't corrected for what we did, I think that's maintenance.
And commissioners, are you in approval? I mean, in
agreement.
agreement with that?
I am.
Yep.
Thank you. So number 12, the healthcare supplies, and then the jail clothing and bedding.
So could any of those health care supplies, do they qualify for COVID? For
So
CARES
the,
Act?
yes, the healthcare supplies are the budget that I put in for 2021 is an estimate based on what we're spending right now for PPE.
Gotcha. So I would recommend leaving that as a PLR and hoping, or in the thought that we will get some more CARES funding.
I'll agree. We can always have that discussion later on in the year if it turns out different too. So.
Okay, so we're in agreement, or you're in agreement to keep those two as a PLR for now?
Yeah.
All three. Okay, thank you. And then the IT trackable equipment, trackable tools and equipment.
I have a hard time with calling those underfunded. That's what we give you money to do. It can't be underfunded if you choose to spend more on it.
So, yeah, I apologize if that word is not quite the right word. I was trying to put in something that was easy to put in. IT trackable equipment. For instance, we're having the touchscreen replaced right now. Those things are starting to break down. So I wanted to put an amount in to cover that. So I'm not sure what we call that.
It's a request.
Okay.
You're requesting 5,000 for your IT trackable equipment.
Right.
Now, this sounds like if you're moving to the touch screen, which we have to do, in that line only, I'm only talking about that line, I think that's a necessary thing with what we're dealing with. I don't see how, so I would think it would be maintenance.
Well, that's like printers and things like
So
that.
it's not just the touch screen, it's pieces of equipment that we have had to replace this year and at the end of last year, and an estimate based on what we may be able to or may have to replace next year. And again, that's based on
lines
what
did
we've
we,
been spending.
what lines have we historically kept those things? Have we historically paid those things out of?
It depends on what it is. If it's an IT trackable piece of equipment, like a laptop, that county IT tracks those. We also have this separate line item for trackable equipment that we have to track internally that isn't tracked anywhere else. So we just have to split them.
Yeah, I guess my question is if we're putting this here today, and we've been doing this historically forever, there has to be some other place that this is either coming out of that we can show the adjustment of it coming out of that line, or this is just a brand new introduction of new stuff.
Give me just a second and let me look at my history on IT trackable equipment. So for instance, in 2019, we spent $1,600. So far through 2020, we've spent over $4,000 just in IT equipment. In trackable equipment, in 2017, $8,300, 2018, $10,000, 2019, $14,000.
But where did they come out of? If we have zero here, and I don't have going back into 17 and 19, but if we have zero in this line for 2020.
Right, they weren't budgeted in 2020, and I don't know why they weren't budgeted in 2020.
Okay.
I know that we requested them in 2020, but they weren't funded.
Okay, so any more discussion on those couple of line items, or do we want to keep as a PLR and come back to that later?
I think I'd like to do PLR for those two, but then not for all 12, just those two on the top, because the next ones, I think we're going to be agreeing that a lot of this might be contractual and it needs to be maintenance. So.
Okay, yeah, we already talked about the 25,000, moving that to maintenance. These two, I don't believe we had a lot of discussion on those.
Yeah, what does it mean? What are we doing on the healthcare services that the increases in there?
So healthcare services are any healthcare for inmates that aren't Mason General Hospital. So anything that we are paying for lab tests or
Is this a 3-year average on that again?
It is, yes.
Okay, I'm agreeable with that being maintenance.
Yeah, so you have healthcare services going from 38 to 50, and then healthcare services, Mason General Hospital, going from 55 to 100.
Correct.
How are those similar, or how are those different?
They are similar in that they are 3-year averages of what we've spent on both of those line items.
So the healthcare services are those that were in the jail?
Is the type of
Those
services.
are inmates. Those are inmate healthcare services that are not. So it's everything that's not Mason General Hospital. We've at some point the sheriff's office split out Mason General Hospital as a separate line item, so they're tracked separately. So anything from another hospital for lab services, for other tests, X-rays, that sort of thing. That's where all of that, all the other healthcare services are expended. And then Mason General Hospital is separated just for a separate tracking line.
I think that's an essential service. And if she's doing it on 3-year average.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Just out of curiosity, what are we year to date to Mason General Hospital in that line?
Give me 1 second. I need to switch to a different set of numbers.
Commissioners, if it's helpful, these are the amounts that we spent in 2019 on those lines. 42,000 and then close to 100.
Yeah. Like I said, I trust when she's telling me this, and it's on, I don't want everything being on a 3-year average. That's not my gig. What I mean is, if it's an essential service and she's giving me a 3-year number, I think it's pretty reasonable request.
So Commissioner, year to date for Mason General, we've spent 45,800. That was through the end of September.
And that's on,
Well, yes, those bills don't come in terribly regularly, but
It's just one of those lines we don't have any control over.
right.
I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
we could balance out for the rest of the year, not spend another dime there, or we could double that.
When you have, just from an operational perspective, Chief Hansen, when you have somebody, from patrol bringing somebody in custody to the jail and they have to get an ER clearance, is that paid for out of this?
Yes, there is no other line in operations for that. It comes out of the jail's budget.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. No, I appreciate the answers on those, and yeah, I'm agreeable.
okay, so we have 2 yeses. Commissioner Trask, are you in agreement with that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then we have the inmate
The same
medical.
goes for the next one. That's a 3-year average again on medical transport. We have it.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely move maintenance to me.
I'm good.
Agreed.
Okay, great. I put the comment in thinking I could delete it if I didn't get 3 yeses. So just wanted to put that out there. So moving on then to number 13, we talked about that. That's a yes. Move to maintenance. Number 14, we have the registration, tuition, and memberships for 19,463.
And that's for traffic deputies.
Explain that one, please, a little more for me.
So for 2020, that was budgeted at $537, and I was trying to even out the training, the accreditation training that's necessary for all of the deputies. So I took part of the money out of patrol and put it into traffic for training.
Oh, so there's a negative somewhere else to offset that?
There's a negative, but it doesn't show up as a negative in patrol training because we still need to do additional training for our patrol deputies. So it's a wash for almost, well, $19,000 of it.
So you're asking for 20 grand more in expanded training from what
Correct.
we've historically done.
In accreditation training. Yes.
And this is absolutely necessary for the accreditation?
Yes.
I'm supportive of maintenance.
So here's a question, and we haven't really gotten into this at all in this briefing. But one of the things that we discussed as a commission at our budget workshop kickoff last week was the potential for, instead of doing a straight diversion of traffic dollars from roads, doing a levy shift to make that money a little bit more flexible on your side. How would this factor into that? I mean, would that move back up to, in that case, would that move back up to regular patrol accreditation, or how would you envision maybe that working?
We could shift that around. We're in the process right now of doing an audit of patrol and traffic time. So we'll have better data at the end of October. Right now, I'd be comfortable doing a shift of about 360,000. I don't know that I can justify more than that, but we could then shift some of that training money around and still cover our 2.16.
When you
I'm
say,
confused at that statement. You can't foresee shifting more than that. Wouldn't shifting it though, there should be no limit on how much could be shifted because it makes it to where it could be used anywhere. So I'm a little confused by the statement.
So the way I'm looking at it is that we have 9 deputies assigned to that at a certain percentage. If we continue that percentage, my only concern is that we will so overspend that traffic, that it won't be visible in patrol. Does
So
that
we're
make
talking
sense?
about taking it out of that and just paying for it out of the general fund instead of traffic.
Yes, I agree with you, Commissioner.
In what way?
Well, I agree that, yes, I mean, we've all talked about it before. If we take money out of the traffic program now, then obviously that cuts into our wages and benefits, and therefore that results in people. But obviously, for every dollar that comes out of current expense that offsets the amount on the traffic side, then as long as that doesn't reduce the overall number, we're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine, as we discussed, it would be a dollar for dollar, but just a different mechanism.
Yes, yes, as long as we're moving it over dollar for dollar.
So, but I guess, my question is, what would that change for some of the traffic line items? How would you maybe, how would you approach that differently if we did it as a levy shift versus a diversion? If you had that
I'll
flexibility.
speak to that really quickly, Sheriff's Office and Commissioners. I just wanted to say that it really shouldn't matter what mechanism that we're paying for traffic. I mean, the dollars spent should be the same in traffic, whether we, do a diversion or we receive a levy shift. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Except for you don't have to show that it's used specifically for that if there's a levy shift.
Right, but yeah, you wouldn't have to. But in theory, you're still spending the money. You're spending it on traffic, or you're spending it on patrol. Yeah, you're right. You wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to prove that it was spent on traffic.
I guess from our perspective, Commissioners, we can justify the 2.1 on traffic now. However, the fine line that we've cut in that in recent years. The lesser degree that we have to provide justification, the easier it will be for us. I don't think that we would have less of an ability to provide that justification in future years, but if it was a lesser amount, it would be less onerous on everyone. Yes.
Well, and let's not forget, we had a $250,000+ hit, and it wasn't the deputy or the sheriff's department's fault. It was all of us collectively that it ended up not working, and it came out of the general fund. The less money that we use in this particular manner, the safer it is for us at the end of the year that it doesn't get turned back and it actually stays within our books properly.
Totally agree.
And I do have an email into our assessor's office asking for a couple different scenarios on shifting some of that diversion over to levy shift.
Great.
And I just want to be cognizant that when we do actuals for future budget years, that we know that we take that into account.
Seems fair.
If we do shift money from one place to another.
Sounds good.
Okay, so with that did I hear everybody is okay with moving this to maintenance, or are we keeping this as a PLR?
I'm good with moving it to maintenance.
Yeah. Same.
Okay.
Okay, then I think we're done. We don't have any for 141 or 142, and 140 is no longer with us. So it's dispersed.
140, huh?
Can you give me you know how I try to keep my numbers in my head? Could you please give me a bottom line what we just increased the last year's budget by, please?
Last year's budget?
Yeah, what the total increase to this year's sheriff's department budget is over last year. What's the changes we just made?
Oh, with the changes? Can I get that to you?
Yes, that's not a problem. I just don't have to be now. I just need it in my head for figuring out how much money we have.
Sure. I can give you what we added in yesterday. We added in $69,299 into current expense, budget level 3. That was in PLRs.
Can you say that again?
69,299.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so with that, is there any more discussion on the sheriff's office budget for now?
Cheryl, I just want to say I always enjoy working with you and your numbers and the way you do it. It has made this job a lot easier to do with the way you've done the probably the largest money department that we deal with. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we agree with you, Commissioner.
Yeah. No, her numbers, you can count on them every time, and I can see them as clear as day when she's doing it. I very much appreciate that.
Hey, Commissioners, I don't want to make a long meeting longer, but can you confirm that you got the third quarter traffic update from Chief Sperling? I think he sent it over.
Yeah, yes, we did.
Okay, if you need any further information on that, we'd be happy to brief on it. Just let us know.
We appreciate the report. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
So,
Madam Chair, can we have a couple of minutes?
Right, and I think check your email, because I think we had a request to move Public Works to Monday.
Yep.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
yes, that's great.
All right. So back in 5.
Back in 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everybody's ready?
Ready.
Okay, so we have the 2021 budget workshop for District Court, and we have Patsy Robinson and George Steele on.
And just real quick, our cameras might go off because our internet connection is unstable. So if you see our cameras go off, it's not because we're ignoring.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready to get started.
Okay, I'm opening up your worksheet right now. Okay, and we have on the revenue side, everything has been moved over to maintenance level. So we're going to the expenditure PLR worksheet. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, just as an introduction, again, I know this will not be a surprise to anybody that we're been dealing with several challenges, as has everyone else. Specifically, our challenges are revolving around the fact that for a long time we were all but completely shut down by the state Supreme Court. We weren't able to hear most cases, and they had to keep continuing them. We've been under, for speedy trial purpose in the criminal world, an excluded period, which is coming to an end. And the situation is that means we have to get the cases resolved. We were, I believe, I've been told many times that we were the first court to restart, first court of limited jurisdiction to restart jury trials. And I was told by an attorney that Lewis County may be the only other court that right now is doing jury trials, but that may be changing. So we've been trying to get the backlog cleared. But essentially what it's caused is trying to get the backlog cleared is we started off with a much higher rate of jury trial before the shutdown. that we had the year before, the first year I was here. And then everything was stopped, and then it's really picked up. We've had 6 jury trials since we restarted in late July. To give you an example of types of backlogs, we have a trial readiness calendar, usually on the last Friday of the month before the trial term. In 2019, those calendars averaged about a little more than 50 cases on them. And the September, October is going to be, I believe, about 160 cases on them, all because of the backlogs that we've been having to deal with. So we've been having to take up that. We've also been having to resort to use of Zoom. We're still not able to have people present in court, except for rare exceptions, the interpreter calendars being one, and the jury trials being another. And Zoom works to a point. Had some interesting experiences, which I'll save everybody the details. They're not terribly stuff worth repeating, but it also takes up more staff side time because we have a clerk in court. We also have somebody up here who is managing their Zoom meeting, even though I'm co-hosting it. So we're having to deal with those types of issues. We did get, I believe, 107,000 reimbursement funds from the CARES Act, which I'll get to momentarily. I think you're already aware of that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through the high point priorities for us and the high points for us, and be prepared to answer any questions. So the first I'd be talking about would be the PLR1, the request for a 0.4 position commissioner. We left it in the request. It's still a need. We don't want to give the impression that it's something we've decided we don't ever need or what have you. But at the same time, for this year, we're not pursuing it. So I'm not really going to advocate for it because we're not really asking for it for this year. We made that clear in our materials we sent over to you. The next place I would go down, however, is to the PLR4, dealing with pro tem funds. And we're requesting a fairly significant increase in those monies. What appeared to me, and I've been trying to track this all along, is up to the first 2.5 months of the year, we were definitely exceeding our pro tem spending than we did the year before. And the reason is because we had a lot more cases going for trial. And while we try to get those trials to be heard on trial week, such is not always going to be the case. There may not be a witness available that a party needs. And, my obligation is to allow people a fair trial. So I have to give some credence to that. So the fact is, we started off on track to exceed the amount we were allocated. Then the COVID-19 shutdown began, and it would have appeared before we restarted the jury trials that we're hardly spending any at all because we weren't allowed to have very many hearings. But it's been more than making itself up. I've checked with Patsy, and we have about $8,677 left, which I believe puts us ahead of the curve. Although we do have an extra 15,000 that were awarded in that CARES Act funding. However, that's going to be much less because of the fact that the big spend on the CARES Act funding was for an extra jab situation, or extra jab system rather, not situation. And after we got it approved, bid came back again, and this time it's about $10,000 more. So we're going to have to shift some of those funds around to make sure we can cover it. And with the idea that this will be going into the emergency temporary courtroom in Building 10, so we can have a JAV system and be able to, which is necessary for many reasons, to give a better recording, but also to really allow people to fully be able to observe hearings via Zoom. And I have an obligation to keep the courts as open as possible and allow public access to the courts. So that's going to be a problem. We are monitoring it very closely, and I've taken some steps to try to get more cases done on trial week, but we're still in a position that we're going to need to have more pro tem monies. We've tried to guesstimate what it's going to be. Unfortunately, guesstimate is about the best I'm ever going to be able to do for you because a lot of the stuff are things I can't predict. I don't have any control over which cases go to trial or do not go to trial. That's up to the parties. If the defendant has an absolute right to a trial by jury, if the state does not make an offer to that individual that they're prepared to accept, they have a right to go to trial. By the same token, the state's not under, the prosecutor's not under any obligation, nor should they be, to make offers in order just simply to avoid trials. So that is something I'm not going to have that much control. And the best I can do is give you a guesstimate. But my best estimate being that the number of cases we're having set for the trial readiness calendar means that we're going to be having more trials confirmed and therefore more trials to go. And my understanding is we've had about 6 trials since we restarted. And again, I think we were the first district or municipal court, for that matter, to restart. We still had 1 trial at the end of July, which is the first month we could have trials. And each of those trials have been 2 days long. We have to do that one day to pick a jury, the other day to present the evidence, because we have to split the jurors up into 9 group subpanels, and that takes longer to go through jury selection. So those are some of the challenges we're dealing with, and it means that we're going to have more pro tem money to be able to run an extra court. And we've already explained this before, that we've had to make the calendars work. We've had to split the calendars up and effectively running on certain days of the week two courtrooms at the same time, because we have protection orders that oftentimes are just as involved as a full-blown trial. They are trials for all practical purposes, particularly when attorneys are involved. And trying to do it all on one calendar, it just simply does not work. And I know that from both as a judge, pro tem judge, when I was here, as a pro tem, and Judge Meadows was the elected judge, and also as a practitioner appearing in court and trying to get a case, through, even if it's something simple, taking a long time because there was too much to try to shove through one calendar, which is what we were having to do. So we really need the extra pro tem money. I cannot emphasize that clearly and strongly enough. The next area, and I'm going to go down to, and I'm skipping around a little bit, but hopefully not too bad, would be PLR number 2 and PLR number 15, which deals with the deputy administrator position that we're asking to have created. The way things are set up right now, there's many duties that Patsy has that no one else is able to do. They would not be allowed to do it because their clerks are not considered to be management employees and are not allowed to do management type functions. So there's a lot of things that even though one of our clerks helps out with, there's a lot of things that she is not able to do. And so it's posing quite a few issues for us to not have that classification, and perhaps have Patsy speak more to it, but there's also a lot of functions that she needs to carry out that she frankly does not have the ability to do, particularly in the age of Zoom, because she's usually the one that has to be monitoring the meetings, because everybody else has their own tasks they're supposed to do, and there's no other person here that can really do it on a regular basis. So we are asking for that position to be funded, and so we can fill it. I think from a standpoint, my understanding is there's a similar arrangement in the Mason County Clerk's office where there's a deputy clerk, and we're essentially asking for the same thing here. And again, we're in a situation if something happens, Patsy's sick or what have you, not able to come into work for any length of time, we need someone that can step in and perform those duties. And right now, there's no one here who would be allowed to step in and perform those duties, and that is a problem for us. So that's one that we are asking for. Then the next thing, and would you prefer me go through my list and then go through questions, or would you want to go discuss them one at a time?
We've been going through the list, and then if we do have questions that pop up, we'll ask you. But I think at the end, we typically go PLR by PLR. Okay.
So the next is PLR 3, and that is for our bailiffs. We've had a couple things go on. First, our rate of compensation's gone up. But secondly, we've had an uptick in trials. Again, many more trials than we had this stage in 2019. And that takes into consideration the fact that for several months, we weren't having any trials at all. We weren't allowed to by the Supreme Court. So the situation is, as things stand right now, we have $468 left in our bailiff budget. And I was told by Patsy, as soon as we pay the last round of bills, because we just got through with the trial this week, and we're going to go into the red. We're going to have spent the entire budget. And they're only here to cover jury trials. We don't have them doing anything else. And as I explained before, we don't have control over the number of cases that are going to go to trial. So we're asking for an increase in for the 2021 budget for the amount of $9,000. We need the bailiffs to conduct the courts. We don't really have the court staff to be able to act as bailiffs on a full-time basis when we are having trials. And we need someone who can take the jury in charge, keep people away from the jurors so we don't run the risk of mistrials and have to do the trials all over. So it's critical in my mind that we have sufficient funding to cover that. And at least for the next year, again, my best guesstimate, and it is just that a guesstimate, is we're going to have more trials than we had in 2019. The next thing would be PLR number 20, and that deals with the interpreter services. And we're having a lot of issues going on with the interpreter calendar right now. First off, and it is a bit of contention, in all honesty, but I'm after trying to use Zoom with interpreter calendars. Most people who's dealing with it realize Zoom does not work for interpreters, and we also have social distancing issues we have to cover. We have to be able to provide. We can't have everybody just crowd down in the courtroom, and it's been a real problem dealing with that. By the same token, when people call in via Zoom that they don't speak English, we have no way of taking roll, knowing who's there, or anything along those lines. It doesn't work. And the situation is, we are required under the Supreme Court to have provide for continuous communication during court with the attorneys and their clients, even if they're appearing remotely. So we've had to, it's not worked, and we're making some changes, but it's still going to mean people will only be allowed at the time their case is being called, one at a time. It's going to take longer. We also have a situation where the interpreters are pressing for minimums, even just to answer, like cover a phone call for 15 minutes. They still have a minimum, I believe 2 hours. And Patsy, if I say anything that's incorrect, trust me, I'm not going to get offended if you correct me. And for the court hearings, I believe it's a 3-hour commitment. We're also dealing with the fact it takes a lot longer, so we're oftentimes going over past 5 o'clock as of late, dealing with interpreter cases. We also have a situation where the probation department needs to have interpreter cases. I didn't realize this at the time, but I have been putting people on active probation that do not speak English, and I'm going to continue to do so because they're the ones where it's appropriate, because they're convicted of the types of cases that there's public safety issues and all that. And they need to be supervised and make sure they follow through with their conditions. And so I am going to continue with that. Probation needs to have a means to, at least by language line or whatever, to have interpreter services available. So I forget what PLR they are. Hold on a minute. I believe it's PLR number 18. So we made those requests as well. That we believe it's very important. I'm not sure I forget how far we are through our interpreter calendar, but I believe we have spent quite a bit of our balance. We also have trial-related costs under PLR 13 and 14. For the jury cost, we had a $300 budget. We have $17 of it left. And again, you have to bear in mind that we had several months. We went from, actually it was a Friday the 13th in March, from after Friday the 13th in March to the last week of July where there were no jury trials whatsoever, so we didn't have any jury costs to speak of. And we're down to $17 of it left. Witness expenses, which I believe is number 14. We're down to, hold on just a minute here. Witness, we're down to $424.93. So we spent over half that budget again, not having to spend any during the period between the 13th of March and the last week of July. So we're asking for some increase there as well. Going to PLR number 17. We're asking for an increase. Again, that's covering UAs. And when I started just about the second day I got here, when we have our review calendars, if you're on probation and you're being called in for review, which means there's allegations you have not complied with probation, and your case was either DUI or similar type of offense, or the facts of it were substance abuse related, most of the time before you leave the courthouse, I order a UA. And the situation is, the idea of being is, I don't want people doing drugs and alcohol on the court's time. The whole idea is, the reason for probation in part is to stop using those substances so you won't break those types of laws anymore. We did get a good increase last year. What I'm being told is we have spent $11,686.95 of it, what we have allocated thus far, although we brought in revenue, but doesn't go back in the UA fund, it goes into general revenues, $14,867. So it's paying for itself. I do think it's valuable. The first 3 months I introduced that, because I had our probation department crunch some numbers for me. Just under 75% of the people I ordered to take UAs were coming back dirty. Drugs, and alcohol is a drug, but people like to differentiate drugs or alcohol, what have you. It is down to just under 50%, which is improving, but still is not a reasonable level. And it's something that we need to continue to basically to hold people's feet to the fire. And not all UAs that are done are ordered by the court. They're also ordered by probation directly. So essentially where we are is we are under a lot of challenges, as I know every other department is. That is increasing our cost. There are a lot of areas with smaller budget amounts that I've not really delved into specifically, but they are in our materials and they're all important. And so I wanted to highlight the ones that I wanted to emphasize for this discussion, and those would be what I chose to highlight. We're trying to do the best we can. It's very important in my mind to get cases through, to hold people accountable, to not have the criminal justice system take a hiatus. We also have a situation where the excluded period under speedy trial has stopped, or will stop on the 15th, although courts will have local authority to extend that period. And I can't tell yet, I just got the order today, whether it's case by case or whatever, but that subjects the court to possible review later by an appellate court. And I have an obligation to get these cases through. I'm trying to do so as expeditiously and efficiently as I can while protecting people's rights. And so we've discussed it, Patch and I and the other clerks, mostly Patch and I quite a bit, and these are things we'd need. We have gotten some relief, at least the ability to be reimbursed via the CARES Act funding. Like I said, I believe we've received about 107,000 authorization for that, which will help, particularly in getting a JABS system. But we're going to have challenges into 2021, and so that's why we're making the request we're making. So that would be my presentation. I'm really here now to answer any questions you may have.
So how many of these, like PLR 5 and 6, it's hard to say what next year will bring, but did you ask for reimbursement through CARES for those supplies?
We have asked for a reimbursement. I'd have to see the CARES Act funding. I think we'd sent it off with our materials as to what it all includes, and I don't have it on hand. I can certainly get that to you again. But we have made the request, but they're also, one of the problems we're running into is some of the things that cropped up after I made the request to the Office of the Administrator of the Court, such as, I believe the bailiff funding is one of them. We didn't really anticipate it would go up as much as it has, but I believe there is some reimbursement that we have available to us. And Patsy might have a better answer than I, if I can put her on the spot.
We did put in for $2,095.96 for reimbursement towards our supplies and expenditures that we've spent. I've already submitted that to AOC for reimbursement. But that's all we put in for the CARES Act.
All right, and I think also AOC is helping with JAVs.
There, in our CARES Act funding, we asked for $50,105, which was the initial quote I got for the new JAVs recording system. That was just for the recording system and the installation. Then, because of Zoom and the problems we're having connecting and the recordings, because it has to be recorded, they're now looking at updating our current ones to have an integrated Zoom attachment. I don't know what's something to do with Polycom. So because of that, I had them redo our quote to include those needs so we wouldn't have to update the new system. And that new quote came back at almost $10,000 more than the original quote. So yes, I did put in for $50,105 for the JAVs recording system. Now, whether that goes into LL2 downstairs or building 10 would depend on installation time and whether building 10 is ready.
Right, right.
And just a thought on those supplies, if there's any that you weren't able to bill to AOC this year, they may be FEMA eligible. Just wanted to throw that out there.
A lot of our supplies are masks and our hand sanitizers that I anticipated we would have to purchase, actually have been supplied to us by AOC. So I have at this moment, I'm good on masks, I'm good on hand sanitizer. We did purchase something because the staff was having to get up out of the courtroom, go down and wipe everything down that was touched. I purchased an electrostatic spray disinfectant gun thing, which whatever it is when you call it.
That's a technical term for it.
It's a technical term, yeah. So basically, not only is it disinfecting and taking care of things, but it's also saving the staff a lot of time in having to wipe things down. It was a little more expensive, but in the long run, I think it's been definitely worth the money.
Right.
And I did also submit that to AOC for CARES Fund refunds.
This, so, 5 and PLR 6. And I'm wondering if we could get those. Oh, I don't know. I'm arguing with myself, as you can tell. It's possible that we'll get more funding in January from for CARES. It's not a guarantee, but it's possible. So some of the increases supply, we might be able to get through there.
Part of the supplies is for also because of COVID and the fact that they're not appearing in person. We have to mail all our all our court orders out to the defendant. The judge has them come in and pick them up if they're in close proximity to the courthouse, but we're not having them drive from Seattle or Tahuya to come in to pick up a court order. So we're mailing it to them. And the cost of the postage and the envelopes and that wasn't really included in that.
So, okay, so PLR 10 says an increase in postage costs and
That's for the postage cost I did increase that.
Okay.
And I also submitted $3,000 to the CARES Act for reimbursement of the $3,000.
Okay.
And generally 30 to 40 minutes away from the courthouse, most people are being instructed to come pick up their orders, particularly on review hearings because of the fact, again, if there's substance abuse related cases, they're also going to be told to do a UA anyway. And I take the position that but for the COVID-19, they would have been taking a day off, whatever they were doing, to be actually in the courtroom. So I think I got people have the expectation, they realize that I'm not too sympathetic to, gee, it's inconvenient, can I come another day? I, generally speaking, will expect to be there that day if they're within 40 minutes of the courthouse. So, and then they would pick up their orders. Then I don't know how much, if anything, that's really saved. I think it must save a little bit, but I haven't really checked with Patsy on whether that's saving any postage. But it's been an increase because, again, in the past, it'd just be get the defendant's signature on the order, give him or her a copy of the order, send them on their way. Now we have to mail it in many cases.
And we're seeing increases in that, I think, through quite a few departments. So do we want to start with the PLRs in number or in order?
Yeah, please, if we can go ahead and start, Jennifer.
Yeah, start a review of them, sure. So number one was not really a serious ask. Is that what we heard?
I would not call it not a serious ask. We have a need for a commissioner, but we recognize that everybody's under challenge this year. And so what we are saying is we're not going to push that request this year.
PLR, please.
PLR 1.
Yeah, PLR, please.
PLR 1. I think the internet's kind of fritzing in and out again a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off, see if that'll help. Okay, so number two is the unapproved budget request for the administrator. Any thoughts on that? Or
being deputy administrator.
Oh, okay, deputy administrator. Any conversation around that?
I'm comfortable with it still being PLR.
Okay.
I'm not prepared to move forward on it at this point.
And Commissioners Trask and Schutte?
Yeah, same with me.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you. Okay, so number three is the bailiff $6,000 increase.
I believe it's maintenance.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so the judge pro tem hours, number 4. Is there any discussion? Do we want to?
I actually believe that there's a part of this that is maintenance. I'm not sure on the number from my personal beliefs on it. One of the worries that I have is when we put this in, though, that it becomes a standard to be based upon for the next year. I'm wondering if there's any possibility that some of these things we're about to look at for costs due to COVID could be kept in a separate line to be used specifically for something, instead of just dropping it into that budget line.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there needs to be some way to asterisk what's kind of above due to our response to COVID, so that we're tracking that. And that's not just for this particular budget, but for department, but I think budget wide, so that we're keeping track of that.
Agreed.
I'd be comfortable on this line with maybe 25,000. They could come and discuss it with us in mid-year if something changes. But I think there's a definite need. It's definitely going to have to happen because of the backlogs. But maybe the number in the beginning is an increase of 25 and come back to us if it actually is even necessary. That's my opinion.
So can we leave that as a PLR and continue to refine it a little bit? And is that what you're suggesting, or?
I'm actually suggesting moving 25 over into maintenance now, because I can justify that in my own head that it's definitely got to happen. I don't know how we would be able to pull it off without increasing that line for the year. I just don't know that the full number that's being requested of an increase of 44 is justifiable, but I could easily see 25 being justifiable, especially if we can keep it, as you said, asterisk, so that we make sure that next year that's not considered the norm.
Right.
I'm also wondering if this might be CARES appropriate as well. Jennifer, could you check to see, because I know we've got the health department also received some CARES funding. Have we received a copy of what they're asking, or how they're planning to spend that?
From the health department?
Right.
I haven't received it. I'll check with Paige. I doubt she's received it if I haven't, but yeah, I can check on that.
Okay.
Commissioner, the problem I have with that, or the question I should say I have with that, is this is for next year's budget and cannot be expended in the time that's allotted by it. If something opens up, I think we could go for that. I'm just not sure how we could apply it to the CARES Act at this point. Am I missing something there? Or?
There are different funding sources. Some of them through the health department does not expire until June or July of next year.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to look to see if something like this would qualify.
Awesome.
Okay, so for now, we're keeping the full amount as a PLR? Is that?
Again, I'd rather drop that down to 25 and make it maintenance, regardless of how we get funded back for it, because that just go into revenue.
Okay, so Commissioner Netherland, you are in favor of moving 25,000, and Commissioner Schutte and Trask, are you wanting to keep the full amount as a PLR and revisit, or are you comfortable moving some amount in at this time?
I could do the 25.
I could as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so 1 and 2, we're keeping those as PLRs. So 5 and 6, so we kind of discussed those.
Right. I'd like to see if we could get, if they're going to be the extra supplies, if we could get them in before the end of November.
I would prefer that as well, front loaded into this budget. If we have to, add it into our supplemental at the end of this year.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I just ran a report for district court through September, and they're at 70.6% of their budget. So, I mean, there's a little bit of, room in there, it looks like, at this point in time. So just wanted to throw that out there. Too.
Yeah, but if we can get it paid, we have to have it done, as the Commissioner Trask just mentioned.
Okay, and then the I don't think number 7 we didn't discuss at all, but other practice has been to keep the office equipment as PLRs.
I agree.
Agreed.
And then number 8.
Number 8, actually that can be reduced from 17.5 because we're not moving forward with giving what commissioner I will need some costs.
And this other 500 is absolutely necessary, you're saying, in order to do business right now?
Well, yes, I do need another printer.
I call that maintenance.
Same.
Agree.
And then the interpreter for 4250.
Is all that absolutely necessary? What are you basing that decision on? The number?
On the interpreter,
Yes.
based on the increase in hourly rate that some of our interpreters are telling us they have to have, and the minimum number of hours. I only have one interpreter that doesn't charge me a minimum. All the others charge me a minimum of at least 1 hour. Most of them, if it's imported, it's a minimum of 3.
The other, if I can interject also, as soon as you're through, Patsy.
Pardon?
As soon as you're through, I need to add to what
Go
you're saying. The other thing is, what we had arranged before COVID, that for Wednesday interpreter calendars, the public defense would pay for the first hour from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock out of their interpreter budget. And the reason that was happening was the first hour would be everybody's downstairs in the basement. Attorneys are talking to their clients. Sometimes, my impression is often meeting them for the very first time, with interpreters working on cases. And even in that period of time, we were not getting our calendars done on time. But with the COVID-19, I have to keep those halls empty as much as possible, and not have the kind of crowding. And on a heavy interpreter day, which is usually when we have mom, because it seems like that's the biggest foreign language we deal with these days, they don't understand Zoom. Zoom doesn't work, and they wind up being downstairs. So we're now paying, the court is now paying for that first hour as well, because we're not allowing essentially it to be used as a law office, use our hallways as a portable law office. We expect the attorneys to meet their clients beforehand and get that done. But that means we have a bigger, instead of paying for 2 to 3 hours, we're paying for 3 to 4 hours of interpreter time. And that's, and again, one of the interpreters particularly is getting real.
I support maintenance.
Same.
Yep.
Okay, and shredding, $100.
Maintenance.
Same.
Same.
Okay, thank you. Copier, post, and postage, $500 increase. We didn't really discuss that one either.
I can see how the postage meter would go up, especially by mailing quite a few, I would say. And that might even become a natural occurrence even after COVID. So I would say maintenance.
Agreed.
Okay, and then this should be part of that PLR 2, I believe it was, the for the that's a keep as PLR. That goes with that position ask. The $700 for juror services, and then witness services, 1,000.
Maintenance.
Is everybody in agreement? Maintenance?
Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so that is again part of that deputy administrator or keeping as PLR. So number 17, the UA fees, $2,000.
If you can justify that, that's an accurate number for what's been happening. And I agree,
Well,
maintenance.
And I thought that that the UA fees were completely covered. You know, we expend the funds, but we receive revenue. Is that right, Patsy?
Right, they are revenue, what's the word I want?
Support.
Yeah, supported by the revenue.
Okay, maintenance.
Agreed.
And the $12.50 for interpreter fees again.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why again. Does somebody have a TV on or something? Because I'm having a hard time hearing.
Hold on just a minute because I'm in my office, and so hold on a minute.
He doesn't have a door.
I hate to do this to everybody, but we need to keep it down. Can you shut Patsy's door?
It doesn't help. It's not.
Maybe we need to put a door in the budget.
I was just going to ask that. Can we please put a door in the budget?
The problem is our files are back there, so you have to go through there to get to our files. So the door would be open anyway.
Does that make it any better?
Maybe we should get a revolving door.
It appears to be making it better.
All right. You were asking, Commissioner Evans, do you want me to answer that question about the need?
Why a separate line for this increase on that?
It's a separate budget.
Well, we keep a separate budget for probation.
Okay.
And this would be for their.
My apologies. I should have saw that already. Maintenance.
Same. Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, and the last one for copier and the postage again, $300 increase. Maintenance. Okay. Oh, and then this one is a straggler from the equipment. The position ask, not equipment ask. It's been a long couple days.
Doing awesome though, Jennifer.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think we're done unless anybody wants to add anything onto our discussion.
The only thing I'd like to say is in regards to the deputy administrator's position. I have attempted for the last probably 3 contract negotiations and worked with Frank to get a position that can assist me with the duties that require a non-union position. As I am the only non-union position in the office. My job has really changed in dynamics over the years, as you probably know, and others have as well. I am running out of, I don't have time to do all the things that are required of me. One of the things that we need to get done are employee evaluations. And I cannot have a union employee doing evaluations on their union partners. So it makes it a little difficult. So therefore, job evaluations haven't been done. And training, she doesn't have the time to do that. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that because it is a very much needed position, and I would appreciate if you consider it.
Can you send me over the job description email?
I believe it was attached to the PLR that I sent over with.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just send me a copy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Patsy, is the idea that you would create this position and then eliminate one of your other positions? Just curious.
I wouldn't fill the other position right away. I wouldn't want to eliminate it because there are some duties that position does that, it doesn't do any good to just take somebody and move it into a different title, because the duties that she's doing now that are not necessarily management are still going to need to be done. I don't know how, I've already.
Can you 0.5 that position?
Which position?
The one you're not planning on filling immediately.
Something to consider.
Well, it would be just a small increase if that was what you were asking, compared to a full increase of.
You're talking about the deputy administrator position, 0.5 it?
No, the other one that you have open.
So the one that would, well, it would depend also if I can't guarantee that, I mean, I can't say that I'm creating this position for a particular person. So if that position is authorized, the deputy administrator position is authorized, they would have to apply for it. And I can't say, yeah, we know who's going to go in that position because I don't necessarily know.
Maybe I'm not making myself clear. If you have an open position now that you're considering whether or not, to fill this next year or not, if you decide that you're not, you didn't want to give up everything on that, and I get that. If that was changed to a 0.5 position and then you were to ask for this position to be a 0.6, what you're actually doing is just getting a reclass for part of that position, which would be a smaller increase.
Which is what I attempted to do, was reclassify that position.
No, I understand that, but
okay, this position is split between, it's a 0.6 in district court and a 0.4. It's a full-time position. It's just paid out of 2 of the probation and the district court. So it's not and I don't have a vacant position right now. I mean, I do. It's just an entry clerk 1 position because she went to work for the treasurer's office.
Yeah.
So if I understand, or Commissioner Evelyn, just so I understand, so you're wanting to know what would happen if we essentially reclassified, we get the deputy administrator position, and between the 2 probation part and the clerk's part, I mean, the clerk's office part, it would be a 1, and then reclassify that 0.1 of what the current person is doing into 1 position.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way to bring the actual overall cost down and still get you where you're trying to get, at least for having somebody in that position that you can't utilize somebody that's union now for that position. I'm just trying to find a way to split the baby, I guess, and look at different options instead of saying no. That's all. And I'm open to different ideas, and I'm only speaking for myself, not the commission, because even if you get me to where I need to be, which I'm not now, you still have 2 more commissioners you have to talk to.
One thing that we could look at doing is if the there is a administrative assistant position currently budgeted. If I got a deputy administrator, I know it sounds the same, but they're really different because the administrative assistant is a union position. I could reduce that to just a judicial support specialist.
Okay, could you show me what that could you have somebody HR or something, or yourself show me what that cost difference would look like, and combine them that way and show me how much money we're actually talking about?
We can work that out, Commissioner, and let you know, so you guys can have that discussion.
Thank you.
I think that would be good for that to be shared with the entire commission too, and that way we're all on the same page.
I agree.
That works for me.
All right, thank you. Thanks for letting me talk.
All right, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you. So we're back on Monday.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.